Welcome, everyone. We have a very special edition of the Indie Reads Aloud podcast today. I cannot begin to tell you how grateful I am to all of the amazing authors who have come tonight to read for you. We're going to have a really good time. Featured tonight are stories from our newest anthology, The Drifter and Other Unusual Tales. Reading for you this evening will be Amy Kelso, Andrew Allen Smith, Chelsea Gwine, Craig A. Breckman, E.M. Reed, H.G. Evans, and R.L. Fink. We are going to have a super amazing good time. Welcome, everybody. Say hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Howdy.
Hello.
Hello. Good to be here.
Hello.
Hey, so those of you who have joined us, let me tell you a little bit about this wacky project we do and how we do it, and then we'll get right into the readings. We believe a more harmonious and supportive society begins with literacy. We believe that a successful life begins with and is enhanced by the written word. We believe that not everyone is inclined or able to pick up trash by the side of the road, give blood, or donate financially to contribute to the well-being of their community. We know there must be an alternative, and we believe that that alternative is the power of the pen. We offer novice and experienced writers alike the opportunity to join together to create a force to be reckoned with, shared experience through the written word. Several times per year, we offer exciting prompts that, when multiple authors contribute, result in stunning books created from our combined creative energies. To date, we have published short story collections including Simple Things, The Portrait of Herbert Losh, Monster Hunter Intern, and The Gift, as well as 2 collaborative novels, By the Seat of Our Pants Madness, and the soon-to-be released By the Seat of Our Pants Chaos. Tonight, we'll be sharing stories from our latest project, a horror, suspense, and thriller collection called The Drifter and Other Unusual Tales. We do these community service projects with one goal in mind, and that is to support the Haley Sue Foundation. Tonight, we have one of their board members, who's also a contributing author, here to speak to us about that foundation. Andrew Allen Smith, will you please tell us about this amazing organization?
Well, the Haley Sue Foundation was started with the idea of helping women and especially young ladies who need assistance initially across the Tennessee area, but it has grown and is going across the country. 2 years ago, my family was faced with a terrible tragedy. My 25-year-old niece, in going to help another person, was unfortunately struck by a car and killed on the way. At the memorial service, there were over 5,000 people there to support her, not only from her college and from all of the people she had worked in theater, in charity events, and helping with cheerleading camps across the country, but people from around the community that knew she was always trying to help people. My little sister and I and a series of other people have started the Haley Sue Foundation. It was started about 1.5 years ago now, and it has given several scholarships, donated to over 150 children so that they could have a better Christmas. And in just a few short, 2 weeks from now, we'll be doing another Christmas giving that is doubled the size of last year. We also have a yearly Haley Sue Day of Giving that comes up next week, and several charity events that help raise funds, and this particular nonprofit will continue to grow. It is a valid 501(c) nonprofit and continues to try to help people, and we hope that it can touch all of the people around and will eventually show everyone that Haley Sue was somebody that tried to make a difference for the world. Why can't we?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew, for helping to facilitate this foundation and for giving us a purpose in creating these anthologies as well. It's always been important to me to give back to community, and I think the written word is one of the best ways to do that. So tonight, before we get into the readings, I want to make 2 little housekeeping notes. First of all, whenever The readers are reading their piece. If you would please make sure to have your microphones turned off so that we can get a nice clear reading from each of the authors. And in between readings, feel free to turn your microphones back on. Feel free to clap, scream, applaud, gasp in terror, whatever, drives you. Yeah, Andrew, yeah, that works. And feel free to ask questions if you have them. If you have questions in the chat room, I'm sure somebody who's much better at this than I am will be able to catch those, and we'll make sure that we get all the questions answered. But again, feel free to turn on your microphones and join in the party. The last little piece of housekeeping I want to tell you about, actually two things. First thing is there is a listener advisory for tonight. Anyone who's listening to this program, please be advised you might want to listen first before you let little ears listen, because there is some mature content in our program this evening. Also, stick around till the very end. We're going to go long, but it's going to be worth it, I promise, because at the end, we're going to do the spinning wheel of happiness. And for those of you who don't know, that's a fun game we play where we give away books. So stick around for that. It's always a good time. So without further ado, we're going to get right into the readings. To start us off tonight, the amazing Amy Kelso, who is just a phenomenal author. She is from Michigan, lives up in the Upper Peninsula where they have 27 inches of snow there now, Amy?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. We'll go with that.
Amy's written a bunch of different stuff. She writes an amazing series for young adults called Mysticos. She writes this, there's an amazing book that she writes about trees that I can't even begin to tell it to. Check out Amy Kelso's work. You're going to love her stuff. Tonight, Amy is going to read a piece for us called The Woman with the Velvet Ribbon. So Amy, when you are ready, please take the microphone and read aloud.
Okay, well, before I actually get on the mic, I do have to give a shout out. We have two student authors joining us today, students of mine. So hello to DJ and Mackenzie as well. We appreciate you coming and supporting me and hanging out with us adult authors as well. So eventually you'll be up here too. So, okay.
Absolutely.
Now for my story. The woman with the velvet ribbon. Have you heard the old ghost story about the woman with the black ribbon around her neck? I know, it's an old classic, right? Probably told a million times before, but have you ever wondered why it's told so often? All I know for sure is what happened to me. And to be honest, I don't even know if it really happened. I like pretending that it didn't, that it's all a figment of my overactive imagination. What I do know is that it was my overactive imagination that started it all in the first place. That and the slumber party. I was 7 years old, or was it 8? It was the first time I'd been invited to a slumber party, the first time I'd been invited to any kind of party. It was, if I'm being truthful here, the first time I really had any friends. I was excited. I was nervous. I was scared. Scared of spending the night away from home for the first time. Scared of what the other girls would think of me. I was determined, though, not to let the other girls know just how scared I was. Once we all climbed into our sleeping bags and the lights were turned off, I thought the party was over and it was time to go to sleep. I soon realized, though, that there would be very little slumber involved in the party. In fact, I would end up getting very little sleep that night or for many, many nights to come. It was the first time I'd ever heard a ghost story. I'd been a bit sheltered until then, and I heard a lot of them that night. They didn't scare me, though. I thought to myself, much braver than I ever realized. The rest of the stories were long gone now from my memory, but the one with the woman with the black ribbon, I will not be able to forget about her. She won't let me forget. Once upon a time, the story went, there's a beautiful woman with long black hair and dark eyes. She always wore a long black lacy dress and a black velvet ribbon around her neck. One day, the story continued, a man fell in love with her and asked her to marry him. She agreed on one condition. You must never ask me to take off this ribbon, she told her future husband, and you can't ask me why I wear it. Do I really need to tell you the rest of the story? The man's curiosity got the best of him. He waited until she was asleep, untied the ribbon, and took it off. And her head fell off, too. Okay, you can laugh now. I know, it's a pretty goofy story. I thought so, too, at the time. Not only that, it didn't even make sense. How could she stay alive if the ribbon was the only thing keeping her head attached to her body? I mean, really, that's just silly. Or it should have been just silly. Why then did the image haunt me so? One by one, as the night wore on, the other girls fell asleep until there was no one else left awake except for me and my overactive imagination. And the image of her burned into the back of my eyelids. As I said, I didn't sleep that night. And it wasn't just that night. For several nights after that, every time I closed my eyes, I saw her staring at me. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't tell anyone why. How could I admit that I'd been scared by a foolish ghost story? It was the third night after the slumber party when things got strange. That night, when I closed my eyes to sleep, her image was gone. All was black. Finally, I thought, perhaps if I had kept my eyes closed, everything would have been fine. It was when I opened my eyes again that the trouble really began. It was when I opened them that I saw her standing next to my bed. She was dressed in a long black lacy dress, just like they said she would be, and just like in the story, she wore that black velvet ribbon around her neck. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She made a face, grabbed for her neck, then yanked at the ribbon to pull it off. I'll admit it, I freaked out. I screamed. Almost instantly, my bedroom door flew open and my mother rushed in. Just as quickly, the woman disappeared. I saw there was this, and she had ribbon neck, and then I tried to tell my mom, but the words were all a jumble. It's okay, dear, she replied in a soothing voice. It's just a dream, just a bad dream. It's over now. You're safe. But and the ribbon, and everything is fine, she repeated. It's just a bad dream. Could you stay with me? Just for a while, I asked my mom. I didn't want to be alone. I was afraid to close my eyes, even more afraid of what I would see when I opened them again. My mom stayed with me that night, singing me lullabies like I was still a small child. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I woke up the next morning, I was alone. Mom was gone, but that was okay. In the light of day, I knew that woman wasn't real. I knew she was in my head, just something I'd made up, nothing to worry about. And so I didn't worry about her again, until I went to bed the next night, until I was alone in the dark, until she came back again. Once more, she stood by my bed. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. She reached for her throat to yank her ribbon away. This time, though, I stopped her. I reached out to hold her hand, but my own slipped through hers as if it wasn't even there. It was enough, though, to make her pause. She looked at me, tried again to speak. Still no sound came out. And yet I understood what she was saying. Did I read her lips? Could I tell what she was trying to say by her body language? By the look in her eyes? Could I read her mind? Maybe it was a bit of all of the above. Help me, she said without a word. Save me. Free me. She reached again for the ribbon, but not to try to rip it off this time. Instead, she simply pointed at it, and I knew, without her saying anything, that it was not a ribbon. It was a collar, a noose, a cage. It was not her ribbon. It belonged instead to every woman throughout history who had hidden her voice from the world. Every woman who had traded her own soul for a pretty dress, a velvet ribbon, and a man to fall in love with her and to never, ever ask her what she had hidden underneath. As I said at the beginning, this happened when I was 8 years old. How then, you wonder, did I understand all that? What does a girl of 8 know about the sacrifices a woman must make to be accepted, to feel loved? The answer, of course, is I knew nothing. And so I did the only thing I could do at that age. I repressed the memory. For a long, long time, I didn't think about what happened at all. Like many childhood experiences, the events just faded away in my mind, faded from my thoughts, faded from my memories altogether. What brought the memory back to me after all this time? It was another slumber party of sorts, a camp this time. a chance for young writers to learn from us veteran authors. I created this activity, a way to think about your life, to explore who you are, and to write about a moment in your past. Like all good teachers, I did the activity with the kids, little knowing what I was getting myself into. I was just writing a story from my childhood, a story about when I was frightened by what was nothing more than a silly ghost story. Or was it? What I now realize is that the woman with the black ribbon never really left me. I may not have understood when I was 8 who or what she was. And yet, as I look back now, I realize I've spent the last 40 years of my life doing what she asked, doing my best to free her over and over again. Every time I meet a new woman, I look beyond the surface. Has she, like so many women, put on the ribbon that is really a tourniquet? It starts out simple enough, I know. It's just a pretty piece of cloth to catch a man's eyes, then a word held back to keep him interested, then a sentence, then a thought, then a feeling, and then your soul. Until at last, there's nothing left to hold your head to your body, to hold yourself together, except the pretty velvet noose around your neck. Now, every time I see that ribbon, every time I see a woman who tries to share her soul but can't, I cry inside, silently hoping that it's not too late. Then I reach out to her, to help her, to save her, to teach her how to untie the ribbon and set herself free.
Well done. Thank you, Amy Kelso. Yay! Okay, any questions from the audience? Any comments from the audience? You can turn on your microphones now.
So Amy, the story with the woman with the ribbon where her head falls off, that was like my sisters and I, that was like our favorite story growing up. I still have the storybook that had that in it. We were just talking about it the other day.
That one just sticks around.
I have the scare in a dark room.
Okay. Because I think it's inside of a book I have called Thrillers and More Thrillers that I got when I was younger.
I actually use that story now in my mythology class. I have students read different versions of it, and we talk about how stories change, but the core stays the same. So it's kind of,
I think that's amazing. I have never been exposed to that story until you wrote this piece.
It was, like I said, my sister and I were just talking about it the other day, so that's amazing. I'm gonna have to send you her your version. Because we literally were just talking. It was such a memorable ending. Like in the version that we had, like the last page was just, and Jenny's head fell off. And then that was the end of the story.
Yeah. It's an image that just sticks with you. So yeah.
Amy, I just want to know how somebody as young as you got so very wise.
Lots of life experience.
Amy took wisdom classes in extra credit.
Yeah, that's what those were. Okay.
Okay, we're going to go on to our next story. R.L. Fink. And I understand, guys, your pen names have to have initials. I don't know. Ruby, hi. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm excited and a little nervous, and hopefully my story is scary enough for everyone here.
You know what? I have yet to be disappointed with any of your work. I don't think that's going to be a problem tonight.
No.
So Ruby is a fairly new author to me. She just joined us on the podcast. She writes really fun detective mysteries for middle grade readers. So if you have any young people in your life, you might want to check out Ruby. And again, in the show notes, you're going to find links to everybody's websites. So if you're at all curious about our authors tonight, jump into the show notes and you'll see everything there. So tonight, Ruby is going to read for us Diary of a Vampire Slayer.
Yes.
Thank you, Ruby. Feel free to take the microphone when you're ready and read aloud.
Absolutely. Now this is at some point going to be a larger story, but right now this is what I have, and so
we love stories that grow into other stories. That's super fun.
All right. Diary of a Vampire Slayer. There's one thing about vampires that I really hate. Actually, scratch that. There are two things that I really hate about them. The first is before they turn, they are normal, with jobs and homes and pets and families. Then some other vampire bites them and they turn into a monster, which I have to kill. The second is because they have turned, they are a problem I have to deal with, even on weekend mornings. There was a time when I didn't have to wake up until noon, and only then because I was hungry and needed to eat Frosted Flakes on the couch while watching cartoons. Now I'm up as soon as the sun is up, and there's no cartoons to watch, even if I decided to take a day off, because most of the network has probably been turned already. Or I killed them. If they had promised to balance being a walking corpse and broadcasting the latest Tom and Jerry on Saturdays, I might have reconsidered. The only movies I have left are the ones I salvaged before this whole mess started, and I've got them memorized by heart. But I digress. My name is Alex. That's it, just Alex. I used to have a last name. I used to have a family too. Well, I had my dad, who took me to baseball games and intimidated any boyfriend I brought home and was teaching me how to drive. Now he's hiding with a few select families who have managed to avoid the bite. One day, when all this is over, I'll be able to see him again. Until then, I have to keep fighting. It's morning at the abandoned mall. I stepped over a body with my leather boot, trying not to slide in the blood on the floor. I'm trying not to make any noise to bring out the rest of the cavalry. I have been watching this place for weeks, and there were about 100 vampires sleeping inside. There was a time when going up against those numbers would have been suicide, but I've gotten pretty good over the last 2 years. Before entering, I threw a couple of my homemade garlic stink bombs in the air vents. They hate it. They absolutely hate the smell. It drives them completely bonkers. It also puts them to sleep for a couple hours, so all I have to do is walk in, preferably when there's still a little sunshine, and stake them through the heart. Now, it sounds easy, but here's the catch. Some vampires have started building an immunity to the stuff, and they're the ones I really have to watch out for. They are not newly dead vampires either. They have actually been around for a while, and they want to kill me just as much as I want to kill them. Don't get me wrong, the stink bombs are useful, but it mostly helps me get rid of the foot soldiers, the grunts. If I could stop, say, the generals, I might actually have a chance at cleaning up this world. But since I haven't figured out a solution yet, I'm here hunting in this abandoned strip mall and getting vampire ick on my new leather boots. One of the vampires lying on the ground stirs, and I go over, stake held ready. She looked like someone's granny, with white hair and little tidy curls around her head, and wearing a pink pantsuit, rather worse for wear. Even her sneakers were those orthopedic ones for people with bad arches. She looked so peaceful lying there. I bet she used to clip coupons and break cookies for her grandkids. Oops. I hesitate for a second, and then her body tenses, her nostrils flaring. She's on her feet and her eyes open in half a second. The sweet, wrinkled little face turned into a feral snarl. I plunge the steak in home before she has time to tear my eyes out with her little granny nails, and she vanishes into a pile of slippery ooze. It's a side effect of being a vampire. The way it works is once someone is bitten, a virus enters the body through the saliva and into the bloodstream. It enhances certain qualities about them, gives them speed, strength, and the need to kill anyone who doesn't smell like them, who isn't like them. All the extra takes a toll on the body, rots them from the inside. If they're newly dead, sometimes I can stake them and nothing happens. Except, of course, they give off a smell of a Thanksgiving turkey my dad once accidentally left in the car for an afternoon. If they have been a vampire for at least a few months, their bodies resemble a gooier texture, like a smashed Pop-Tart or a cafeteria pudding. Then there are those who have been a vampire for a really long time, ones that have been like that for 2 years or more. Those will turn to dust. Like Colin. When I finally catch him, he'll look like the powder on the bottom of a bag of Cheerios. I've walked around the mall twice and no one else has stirred. Then I notice a blood trail on the floor. Something has dragged one of the bodies into the shadows and is feeding. My heart sped up a notch in fear. Could it be him? Then a pang of disappointment hit me as I realized he wouldn't do something this stupid. Like me, Colin has gotten a lot smarter over the years and more experienced. By nature, vampires prefer the sweet tang of human, normal blood, Homo sapien blood. Considering that is harder to come by now, Homo vampirus works just as well. It's like the difference between a fresh loaf of bread just out of the oven versus something that has been pushed to the back shelf for a few months. Fresh is best, but if you're starving, who cares if there's a little mold growing on the crust? The noises were coming from a darkened shop, something that used to be an old kid's gap. Man, I miss those days. Every year, a week before school started, I'd drag my dad in there and leave him standing uncomfortably by the neon couches with pop music blaring from speakers and pick up some new outfits for school. Afterwards, we'd go to the batting cages and work on my swing. Dad would buy us hot dogs from a street vendor, and we'd stay there until the manager yelled at us that it was closing time. In those days, all I had to worry about was making the softball varsity team in the spring, or passing a math test, or getting a date to the fall dance. Now here I am, wide awake on Saturday morning, busting my butt to stay alive. The sucking noises continued, and I crept closer, picking up a mannequin's arm lying on the floor as I went. Here comes the tricky part, because if this goes wrong, I'm going to look like hamburger meat. Pricking my finger, I rub a thin line of blood along the plastic arm and wave it around like a piece of steak. I can hardly smell the coppery aroma, but I know the vampire can because the feeding stopped. Remember that bread simile I used a while back? That brief prick of my finger to the sucker in the corner is like opening the door of a bakery to a starving person. Except in that case, a beggar wouldn't go charging for my jugular vein. Well, maybe if my neck was made of fresh bread. Some of the clothes racks were thrown out of the way as a dark shape hurtles toward me, fangs bared in a snarl. I swung the arm, timing it so I hit it in the throat and tipped it over on its back. I drove the stake into the male vampire's chest before it had time to react, and the body dissolved into a pile of stinking ooze. I have done this so many times now, and it's still disgusting. Poor sucker. He was probably some normal guy who had a family and a dog before he was bitten. Now he looks like a large pile of frozen chocolate custard on a hot day. I know in that moment I think I should probably knock on wood or something, because I heard the slow clapping sound approaching my location. I yanked my sunglasses out of my pocket and put them on. I know who it is, but unlike a stupid grunt, I actually need to see this jerk. Glasses look good on you, Lexi, said a familiar voice. Nathan Horgan, former captain of my high school football team, stepped into view, just outside the pool of light. At 6'2", with blonde hair and the body of a swimsuit model, he still looked like Glendale High's favorite heartbreaker, complete with a raggedy Letterman jacket. Except for his eyes. They were the eyes of a monster, blood red and hungry for the kill. Wish I could say the same thing about you, Nate, I said, scanning the darkness behind him. Maybe you should try and get some sun. Nate smirked. That's funny. How long have you been waiting to use that line? Oh, a couple weeks, I said casually, still scanning the empty mall. I didn't like how quiet it was. Alive or dead, Nate never traveled far without a posse of obedient followers. I don't see your boss around. I'm still only important enough for his redhead right-hand thug. Annoyances like you are only dealt with by number one men like me. I forced myself to laugh, daring him to step into the light. Get any closer and I'll make you look like number two. Nate snarled, and I caught a flash of fangs, but he didn't move forward. I had to make him angrier. So what's the plan, Nate? We gonna fight? Or were you hoping to catch a movie with me? Not today. Nate smiled and licked his lips. You're gonna die. I yawned, trying to look bored. You've been saying that for 2 years. Maybe I should get you a card. I'm sentimental that way. Not sentimental enough to stop killing my children. You call those victims your children? I felt my temper rise. They were regular people before you turned them into bloodthirsty monsters. They were special, chosen, to help carry out the master's great plan. Actually, they're practice for me, I goaded him, until I can hunt Colin down and put a stake through his heart. Don't you dare say the great master's name. Nate stepped forward with a hiss, and I steeled myself to hold my ground. You are not worthy of that honor. Colin, legs like ramen. The words didn't rhyme, but it still got Nate mad enough because without warning, he stepped into the light, his hood pulled low, protecting his face from incineration. I took a step back and grabbed another stake. Nate lunged, swinging at me with fists protected by leather gloves, trying to chase me into the shadows. I fended off the blows, and we circled in the light, looking for an opening in each other's defense. I like the gloves, Nate, I panted. You borrow those from Gucci? The owner is a friend of mine, Nate said. Makes it easier to go outside. Gotta love those vampire discounts, I suppose. I dodged a blow to my head and got a punch in the stomach that had me almost bending over. You should try it sometime. Join us, Nate said. I shook my head, fighting for breath. Tell Colin he can jump on a stake. Nate drove at me with fangs bared, and I stepped sideways, letting his own momentum carry him into the shadows again. He turned, unexpectedly calm, a smile on his face, and shrugged. Well, I tried. Raising his gloved hands, he clapped twice. I felt the hair on my neck stand up as I heard the sound of approaching boots, sound of marching ringing through the abandoned mall. I could see the figures of vampires approaching, their red eyes glowing like embers of fire. Within a few seconds, they surrounded the ring of sunlight I was standing in. Let me guess. I tried to keep my voice casual as I let my hand straight to my jacket pocket, feeling for the circular object among the other items. You give me a little warm-up, so now it's time to send in your muscle to do the dirty work. Nate shrugged again. Or you could save us all the time and just give up. I had fought too long to stay alive to give up now. Keep dreaming, jerk, I snapped, and flipped open the makeup compact I'd been holding in my hand, catching him full in the face, the reflected sunlight burning a fist-sized hole in his cheek. Nate screamed in outrage and pain as the smile of burning flesh filled the air. The sucky thing is, given time, his wound will heal, courtesy of the virus. But it still pissed him off. Almost hit you in the eye that time, Nate, I taunted him. Would you like me to try that again? Joke while you can, Nate rasped, clutching his face. My children will rip you to shreds. He turned to the waiting vampires. Finish her off. No mistakes this time. There were hungry snarls from the watching vampires, and they circled the light like jackals, held back by the sunlight. I called out to Nate, trying to delay the inevitable. What, that's it? Just gonna go slinking back to your master and hope they kill me? Goodbye, Alex. Whatever you say, sweetheart, I shouted, struggling to remain calm. What is it? 20th time is the charm? Nate did not reply, merely pointed at me with a gloved hand. The vampire surged past him, licking fangs eagerly. The fight to the death had begun. Again. One or three of the stupid ones jumped at me and tried to knock me out of the sunlight. I dodged, and two actually collided with each other in a ray of sunlight. They fried instantly, scorching flesh turning to ooze. The others hissed and circled like a pack of hyenas. I tried not to look like I was shaking in my boots and gave them my best smile. I'd faced overwhelming odds before, but it looked like Nate had recruited an army. And then some. Now, boys and girls, I said, raising my hand to be heard over the snarling undead, I just want to go over a few ground rules with you. No cheating, no biting, and above all, no tattling to daddy. And if any of you get ooze all over my new shoes, I'm going to be very, very annoyed. All I got back in response was more hissing. Why do I even try? I sighed. I'm wasting perfectly good comeback lines on you blood addicts. I had 4 stink bombs I kept stuffed in my back pocket, and I took them, lit them, and threw them into opposite sides of the pack. The ranks thinned considerably as one by one the vampires succumbed to the smell. I switched my stake back to my right hand, just in case any of them got too close, and searched through my jacket pocket with my left until I found what I was looking for. I still had one surprise for those who were standing. Something I learned back when I was in pre-K. I pulled out my magnifying glass, focused a beam of reflecting sunlight on an unsuspecting vampire. He let out a scream as first his hair, then his head caught on fire. I hit a female standing next to him who had particularly long locks, and her head and torso went up in flames as well. I learned this by accident a few weeks ago, but vampire hair is extremely flammable. Probably due to their lack of decent hair conditioner, though it could also be the fact that they're, well, undead. I hit another and another. It was like burning ants again, except at a much larger scale. There was mass panic in the room as vampires ran around, trying their best to beat out the flames. Some got too close to others, and they caught on fire as well. The smell of burnt hair and decomposed skin makes me want to puke. Vampire killing isn't teen cookies with the queen. If it was, maybe there would be more of us. Or maybe not. Colin was doing a spanking good job of killing off everyone except, well, me. More vampires were howling for my blood, and I kept the mirror in my left hand and my stake in my right, alternating between stabbing and frying. I tried to keep up a steady rhythm, but wouldn't you know, the other team tends to cheat, and some coming all at once, others sneaking up behind. But I still managed to get them all. The mall now smells like the time the grill exploded during Dad's barbecue birthday a few years ago. No one was hurt, except for a rack of pork lambs roasting on the fire. This is worse, though. The pork ribs didn't scream in agony. I fought the bile rising up in my throat. Some of the vampires were hobbling around on charred limbs, stumbling and slipping in the ooze of their defeated companions. A few fell over, twitching, and lay still as they too began to decompose into organic matter. The rest were sleeping off the effects of my stink bombs. If I didn't step out of the light soon and stake them, they would rejoin the masses trying to attack me. I'm so tired. So tired. My adrenaline rush was waning. My arms and legs feel leaden. I wish I could stop fighting. I wish I could rest. I was dripping with sweat, and I raised my arm, frying another vampire as I wiped my sweat with my less sweaty shirt. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I hear the sound of more boots approaching in the distance. That bastard Nate sent reinforcements. There is no way I can stake them all. I had only one thing left to try, and I've never tested it before. I took 2 bottles out of my pouch, testing the weight as I scanned the approaching army. I had a few things in my favor. Firstly, they were hungry. I knew from experience Colin purposely starved them in order to make them more eager for blood. My blood, in this case. Their senses were on high alert, especially their sense of smell. They were seeking the scent of fresh human blood like sharks in water. While there are ample bodies lying around they could snack on, I am a tastier morsel than the charred lumps of vamp flesh languishing on the dirty marble floor. All this self-preservation exercises was, unfortunately, making me smell better and better with every minute. Secondly, the cremated vampire creates a smoke that is very disorienting for the newbies who are relying on their olfactory systems. The bottles in my hands came with smoke too, but the added aroma to the rest of the smells in the room would make it extremely confusing. However, the bottles also contained an ingredient that could be my salvation or death, depending on my timing. My blood. I squinted, looking to the back of the mall. The reinforcements were getting closer. If I waited any longer, I would be stuck in a mass bloodbath of no return. I lit and tossed the bottles, aiming for the doors where the new vampires were coming in. The little objects exploded, releasing a cloud of vaporized human blood scent over all of them. There was a crumbling stair railing to my left, and I leapt for it, managing to grasp a bar with a couple of fingers, pulling myself up and out of the way. If the vampires were hypothetical sharks, the bottle was a hypothetical dummy dropped in the water and covered with bloody stakes, or in their case, another bleeding shark. The mall became total chaos as vampire turned on vampire, totally consumed in bloodlust. It didn't matter what they tasted like now, the scent of my blood overwhelmed it all. Ordinarily, the 2 parties might have been smart enough to realize the room didn't suddenly fill with humans, but they were hungry. Their primal super sniffers had been awakened. Neighbor turned on neighbor, neither realizing they were one and the same species. Using the distraction below to make my escape, I followed the railing as far as I could, then dropped the 10 feet to the ground and sprinted for the open doors. Very few vampires were in the area. Most had converged to the back of the mall where the feeding frenzy was. Those that tried to stop me, I staked, staying in the sunlight as much as possible. I was exhausted. My heart was pounding. My legs were seizing up from exertion. The door was just a few more steps away. It was almost there. I could see the blue sky outside the open door when a pair of hands fastened unexpectedly around my ankle. I stumbled and fell, helpless as fangs lashed onto my pant leg and bit down.
Well
All right, that's
done,
it.
Ruby. Yay!
Yay!
Nicely done.
Thank you.
I especially enjoy your happy blend of horror and snark.
I was gonna say the sass on that was amazing. I loved it.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to write more of that. I
Descriptions
just
were amazing.
thank you.
That was a spicy meatball. I love it.
Thank you. I was getting through some of those descriptions like, oh boy, I didn't realize this was going to be this tedious. I'm so sorry.
Oh, come on.
They were good. They were good.
It was
Yay.
awesome. Thank you so much. That was really, really awesome.
It was
Welcome.
indeed. Okay, we are going to move on to Chelsea Gwine. She's going to read next for us. Chelsea has written a novel called The Midnight Man, also creepy and kind of, well, let's just say I had to turn on the lights a couple of times when we were going through edits. So,
Ooh,
it's a really great book. I'm waiting for the next book, Chelsea, so
We're working on it.
get with it. We want more from you. Chelsea wins the distinctive honor of being the person who drove this book to the finish line. I think she has submitted more stories to this book than anybody else. And we are tremendously grateful. I love, Chelsea, how you just grabbed the baton and ran with it.
Dude, I
Well-
posted in every writing group I could too.
And you did a great job. We appreciate it. So tonight you're going to read a story for us called Mother Knows Best. It's one of the shorter
Oh.
pieces.
Yes.
When you are ready, please take the microphone and read aloud.
All right, here we go. Mother Knows Best. Emmeline hummed a cheery tune as she traversed the winding path through the woods behind her manor. The weather had just begun to turn after a fairly warm autumn season, and she was glad for the foresight of wrapping herself in her shawl before setting out earlier in the day. It was a rich sapphire to match her eyes, the only bit of color over her drab black morning attire. She fondly ran her fingers along the edge of the garment. Crude flower designs were stitched there from her young maid's cross-stitch practice. Emmeline couldn't help the soft smile from forming as she reminisced on the girls. Janine and Clarice weren't too much younger than Emmeline herself, but had been such permanent members of the manor. She often thought of them as sisters instead of her staff. Despite only a few years separating them, Emmeline found herself longing for the carefree innocence the maids exhibited. They had yet to be spurned by the harsh realities of the world as she hadn't yet felt the sting of punishment of a bad choice. No, Emmeline admonished herself, shaking her head so roughly, a few of her hairpins wiggled loose from her tight bun. She had set out today to relieve herself of the dark and gloomy thoughts. Emmeline had ventured just to the edge of the woods, close enough to hear the bustle of town before her nerves got the better of her. She just wasn't ready to face the members of the small community and the whispers of all her past sins. It had only been a few months since Emmeline's baby boy had gone missing, but his mother ached as if it had been an eternity. Still, she longed to run her fingers through his dark tuft of hair, to hear his soft coos as he shook his rattle, or to feel his pudgy fingers wrap around hers. The last time Emmeline had dared venture into town, she was mocked for her mourning attire and ridiculed for her anguish at seeing the notice of her missing son gone yellow and buried by other missing notifications on the bulletin. The constable had been less than sympathetic to her case. After all, her son had been born outside of wedlock, abandoned by the man she had thought was her happily ever after, and then the son of their union was, and then the missing of her son of their union was seen as poetic justice, all immediately following her father's tragic passing. With a much heavier sigh, Emmeline shifted her heavy canvas to her opposite shoulder and finished her walk back to the manor. She called out to the girls and got no response. Checking the kitchen, she noticed a pie cooling on the window and figured the girls must have made their own trip to town to gather missing dinner ingredients. She smiled fondly as she hung up her shawl, noting the girls' aprons thrown hastily aside. She was alone and knew that Clarice and Janine tended to stretch their time outside the manor as long as they possibly could to avoid their least favorite chores. Still, Emily hastily climbed the flights of steps and snuck her skeleton key from its hidden location as she tiptoed up to her attic studio. Once securely locked inside, she observed the surroundings. She took inventory of her various paints and tools and making note of what would have to be restocked the next time the girls made a shopping trip. Once Emmeline had tidied the room to her liking, she knelt beside the canvas bag and unzipped it cautiously. Inside, the usual painting supplies and portraits normally stored after an afternoon in the woods were not there. Instead, bound tightly in excess hair ribbon was a small boy, his round eyes wide and full of tears, his cheeks ruby red and streaked with salty tracks. Shh, shh, Emmeline hushed, scooping the toddler up and cradling him close. You're okay, Mummy is here. She gently untied the ribbon from his wrist and around his mouth with great care not to tug on the boy's hair. The boy took a shaking gasp of breath and continued to sob. His little hands curled into fists and he tried to dislodge himself from her arms while crying out, no. Emmeline began to sing a lullaby that had soothed her son since birth, but the toddler didn't cease his struggles or his cries. She tightened her grip around his wiggling body. It's okay, dear. It's okay. I'm going to take care of you. We're going to be a family. I want my mom, the boy sniffed, wiping his tears away with the back of his hand. I'm your mom, Emmeline said softly. I'm going to feed you, clothe you, and love you. We'll sing songs and tell stories. We'll be a happy family, I promise. The boy struggled in her tight grasp, his sobs growing louder as she cooed at him and bounced him in her arms. Emmeline tutted. Now be a good boy for Mummy, she pleaded. I need you to be quiet. We mustn't let the others know you're here. Not yet. She tried to cover his mouth with her hand, but he gave a screech and bent himself backwards with such force, he pitched himself from her arms and tumbled to the floor. There was a second of silence as both overcame the shock of the boy's tumble. Emmeline felt as if she'd been doused in cold water, doubting her capability as a mother if she couldn't even calm a distressed child. The boy began to cry again as the shock wore off. Bruises began their steady throbbing along his body. He tried to crawl to the door, but he was immediately scooped up by Emmeline again, her tears mingling with his. Oh, my baby, I'm so sorry. Let Mummy kiss it and make it better. She tried to pull him close to press her lips to his forehead, but the child's small bunched up fists wailed upon her face as he continued to scream no. Emmeline could feel her blood racing in her veins as she was pummeled by his baby fists, her ears ringing with continuous screams. This wasn't her baby. He wasn't her child. Her baby would never disrespect his mother like this. She was a good mother. Any child would be grateful for her welcoming them into her home. Her fingers curled in the child's soft flesh, her nails sinking into his back as the room was painted red in her gaze. I'm a good mother, she screamed to the boy's crying face, shaking him as she continued the mantra. I loved my son and he loved me. She rattled the boy harder and his screams proceeded to rise in decibel. Emmeline knew that what she had to do. This was a mess she couldn't expect her maids to clean up for her. So while tears continued to streak down her face, she covered the child's mouth with her hand to muffle the noise and with a sharp twist effectively broke his neck. The body went limp in her arms and she cradled him close, humming her eerie lullaby once more. Softly, she closed the child's eyelids and folded the body up, placing it back into her canvas bag. She took her time lacing her boots and wrapping herself in her shawl once more. Her trip down the winding dirt path wasn't as hurried as it was this morning. She leisurely followed a trail that had been overgrown with foliage, leaves crunching under her as she continued. Partially hidden by thick trunks deep off the traveled path was a ditch that Emmeline vaguely remembered was, at one point, going to be some sort of a shed her father would have constructed for tinkering. Other than prepping the foundation, he hadn't gone much farther before falling ill. But the ground had remained a steep pit, yet to be discovered by anyone but herself. With a tisking noise, Emmeline unzipped her canvas bag and lifted the limp body of the boy she'd been so pleased to find just hours before. His round cheeks and dark shock of hair had reminded her so much of her son. She'd been sure he'd be the one to fill the hole in her heart, but alas, he was more like the last few. She laid the corpse into the ditch as if tucking the boy into bed, just as she had the previous boy and the one before that. Of course, looking now, her previous children were hardly recognizable but for some rotting flesh clinging to bone. Emmeline sent a quick prayer for a restful journey to heaven for the boy and began picking her way back to the manor. She'd wondered if she'd run into her maids when she returned to the main path. Maybe tomorrow, she thought, I could try a little girl. The end.
Thank you, Chelsea. You're like so creepy. So creepy. And this was one of your gentler pieces.
Yes, I really have to say that I really liked that, Chelsea. I liked
I'm not sure if I should say good job or not. I don't know. Very good, but not good, but good. Yes.
Thank you.
Amy, it
Um,
was kind of entertaining to watch your face throughout that reading.
This is actually my friend and I are actually writing a book together about the two maids and how the Emmeline lost her child, and Emmeline doesn't really get the spotlight, so it's kind of fun to get into her head because in the book that we're writing, it's told from the maids' perspectives. Yeah, so this was just like a little behind the scenes of what else we're writing about.
Some little on the creepy side, but okay.
That's me.
It is, which is surprising because I know you and you're not a creepy person in real life.
I know. Just buried up here.
That's exactly what she wanted you to think. Now
I
you
know.
have to go to her house next week and
Well,
Don't look too close in the backyard.
you know, there are reasons Chelsea doesn't know where I live. All right. We're going to move on to our next author. One of the greatest things, one of the best things for me, one of the things I take tremendous joy in when we pull these anthologies together is that I get to become exposed to writers that I probably never would have met or heard of before. Craig is an example of exactly that joy. I've never met Craig before, and he submitted to this book, and I was so taken, Craig, by your story. I thought it was just incredibly inventive, and I'm really excited to share your work on the show today. I want to welcome you into our Wacky community, and I'm really pleased that that we're going to create this new association, and I hope to see more of your work in future anthologies as well.
Yeah, thanks for this opportunity. It's been really fun. It's a great opportunity. I mean, this time of the year anyway, it's just awesome to sit around and talk about horror books. So
yeah. Well, you know, the deadline was Halloween, so this is kind of an after the fact, but I don't know if it's so appropriate going into Thanksgiving, but it is what it is.
it is what it is, right? Yeah.
So tonight, Craig is going to read Plants Growing in Darkness. Please, Craig, when you're ready, take the microphone and read aloud.
I'm ready to go. This story was actually inspired by my granddaughter. She stays with us often, sometimes for a long time, and but she's one of these people that has those cinematic dreams. You know, I have, my son does too, and so she tells us her dreams, and we're always blown away and inspired by them. So this is one that was inspired by one of her dreams.
Awesome.
Plants growing in darkness. Sorry, I'd nearly forgotten my mother. She had followed a rabbit down a hole, is what my grandma said. My mother called me Kale, which sounds like that awful leafy vegetable. Everyone else called me Kayla. After her stroke, Grandma tried to talk. Sorry about if my light goes in and out, maybe it's haunted. I think my room's haunted, but anyway, sorry about that. I just forgot to say that. After her stroke, Grandma tried to talk. She talked too much, but hardly anyone could understand what she said. She would slur and spit, talking mostly to her plants. It was horrible to sit at the table and watch her eat, talk, and spew, or she would sit on the porch and yell at the kids next door, her hair all crazy like a handful of dry weeds. The neighbor lady must have had 15 kids, all under the age of 10, all brats. At dinner, Grandma would yammer on and on, gushing food like a small volcano, chunks on her chest and globs hitting the table. When she got around to mentioning my mother and the rabbit down the hole, I knew that it was usually a sign that she was ready to trail off and stop talking. Living with some junkie in Omaha was one of the last things that Grandma slurred about my mother. Asking Grandma about my mother was like two magnets at opposite poles. The closer I came to asking about her, the further Grandma was repelled. That year after high school, I stayed with Grandma, cleaning the house and helping her. But Grandma still tried to do much of the cooking, wheeling along the kitchen's tiled floor, sometimes crawling to wrench the oven door open and slide in a pan. It was therapy for her. Then there were all her terrible plants. In her incredibly old house, it was mysterious. Though there were countless plants, none were kept near a window unless the window was covered or curtained. And there were windows everywhere in this massive house. Leaded glass windows with window seats, a broad landing on the stairs with soaring triple panes of brilliant stained glass. And in the dining room were tall windows hung with ancient lace curtains, none graced by plants. If I tried to move a failing plant closer to the light, Grandma would scold and scoot it back with her foot. Grandma blathered to her plants incessantly, insanely, but stranger things were beginning to happen. I know it's weird, but when I watered them, it felt as though the plants would grab at me. They would tangle on my sandal or snag my jeans. It was creepy. They were delicately brushing against my hands, or somehow a thread of vine would twist onto my ring. At night, the house would come alive. After one particularly noisy night, Grandma had explained with fractured words how the house was just mumbling as it settled its bones. On nights like those, I would never leave my room, because when I heard the clamor, it scared me. I had been raised in a new apartment with my dad, so I had never lived with old noisy walls. But my own lost mother would have grown up in this home. I realized that I could comfort myself at night by pretending that the noises were merely the sounds of my mother bustling around the house, caring for me, keeping me from harm. Then I would drift off to sleep. Kale! I awoke, rubbing my eyes from the sun-filled room. It was the name that only my mother called me. Kale! Hoarse and far away again, as though my mother were calling to me from a dream. Then I heard a crash downstairs near the kitchen. I ran out of the bedroom, down the stairs, sliding into the kitchen in my socks to see Grandma in her wheelchair, her head swiveled toward me with a creepy half smile. But just as I had come through the door, I could have sworn I saw her brace with both hands firmly on the arms of the wheelchair and smoothly plop into the seat with a big pan in her lap. I thought that was impossible for her. Other than the clamor, nothing seemed out of order until I remembered that her big metal pans were always stacked on top of the refrigerator where she could not reach them. That was a spirited day. Grandma was feisty, scolding me again for not caring for the plants properly. The weather was riled, blowing a frigid, wet October day against the old bricks and ratty shutters of the house. The windows hazed with moisture, and every room smelled like a damp basement. Even her forest of plants seemed unsettled. One or two plants had toppled under their own weight. Throughout that disturbing day, she talked to them, her blubbering speech wavering between scolding and comforting. By evening, spooky quiet had settled over the house. I woke up at midnight expecting the usual creaking and scurrying, but it was silent. I fell back into a deep sleep. Kale, help me. I was dreaming something about my mom. I no longer remembered her face, so in dreams I would not see her features, but this was worse. She was like Grandma in a wheelchair, but all tangled in vines and branches, and she did not have a face. She moaned through doughy flesh, writhing and tossing her head side to side. I woke gasping at 2 a.m. to insane patter and commotion in the hall. I was certain I heard children laughing. I imagined those damn neighbor kids had broken in to torment Grandma. I finally got the courage to open my door as two naked children screamed down the hallway with wild hair, crazy eyes, and smeared head to toe with dirt. Wild, dirty kids from everywhere. As they scurried, their hair flopped and waved in braids, dreads, and spiky shocks. I turned toward the end of the hallway where several were digging in the big pots by the arched windows. No, they were standing in the pots, up to their knees, pushing on the sides to wedge themselves out. I stifled a scream at the destruction, but my thoughts turned toward saving Grandma. She would have a heart attack if she were to hear them and see what they had done. I ran past three kids and yelled at them, get out of here, where's your mother? They talked back, but it was in the words that mocked Grandma's gibberish. What monsters these brats were. They were nothing like the neighbor kids. The neighbor kids were pudgy, mean kids, but these naked children were squat and muscled, their faces feral and twisted. Like pistons, my feet pounded down the stairs. I was stunned. Where there had been plants in the sitting room and lining the front hall, now stood revolting creatures. They weaved and swayed in the pots, their long heads sprouting spikes or leaves, while their torsos, scaly green and twisted, smoothed into skin. Their waving limbs were turning to impossibly long, gesticulating fingers and narrow hands that pushed on the sides of the clay and porcelain vessels, extracting themselves from the dirt. Under plumes of greenery, faces long and sad like old men, until shedding their bark-like skin, they revealed savage lips and fierce eyes. Under heavy brows, as the strange faces rounded into turnip-like heads. Even in nightmares we act. I sped past the kitchen where one child had climbed up to gulp out of the faucet. It turned to stare at me, its maw dripping and dirty. These are not sprites or fairies, they were childlike horrors, evil trolls. They had scarcely noticed I was there until suddenly all changed. Silence, as if on cue, they became aware of me. Everywhere I looked, scores of naked, dirty children stared at me, yellow eyes, sharp baby teeth, their nostrils caked with snot and dirt. I stepped backward out of the kitchen, never looking away from them. They followed, dirty feet on stubby legs, fingers curling at their sides. I'd try the basement door. The plant children were ghoulishly silhouetted with the kitchen at their backs. Looking for keys, my fingers scurried along the basement door jamb. I pawed like a kitten until I extracted a ring of iron keys, 3 skeleton keys and 1 freakishly ornate key like something from a fairy tale. I fumbled, trying each key in the lock. The first one never is the right one. The children crept closer, now mumbling in unison. The second key was too big. It nearly stuck in the hole until I shook it loose. The large, funky key could not be the right one. I tried the 3rd skeleton key. I felt a cold hand on my leg. Each stubby, dirty finger was lined with sharp thorns that dug in, gripped my calf. I kicked it away, and the ugly child reeled back, tore loose from my flesh, and fell onto the others with a solid, squishy thump like a shovel hitting a melon. The 3rd key turned. I rushed into the basement, slamming the door behind me, severing one mushy, thorny hand. I covered my mouth, but I could not stifle the screams. The detached hand writhed and squirmed as it lay on the step, oozing gooey aloe slime while it clutched about, searching. My feet pounded down the tattered steps until my socks slipped on the musty floor. I looked desperately for a door in the cavernous basement. I scrambled through a maze of stone and brick, inhaling the damp odor of mold and coal. Scant streetlight filtered through horizontal windows that hung with webs and were covered in the haze of generations. I slapped at the walls until I groped an ancient round light switch from a century past. I turned the knob on the switch. Crack, pop. Lightning flashes blinded me, and I was showered with glass from exploding light bulbs. Just missing my eye, a shard stuck in my cheek. One dim bulb remained dancing on a cord. I heard the scrabbling and tinny scratching overhead as they crawled through ductwork, spitting muffled, high-pitched chants. Through iron vent grates poked thorny fingers reaching like fat spider legs. Their scratchy voices grew louder, higher like horrific mosquitoes thirsting for blood. Behind me, a vent cover clattered to the brick floor, then another in the darkness on my left. Running and flailing like a dropped fire hose, my head swiveled and my arms flapped. Every rough wooden door I tried was locked. The sodden boxes and old trunks were not large enough to hide me. I dove toward a hallway leading into darkness, reaching for another light switch. Another dim bulb lit a low green door that was secured with a large black padlock that could have been from a pirate movie. I still held the key ring. I thrust the large rusty key, turning with both hands. The shackle would not disengage, and I could not kick it with my wet socks. I grabbed the lock, turned it slightly, pounded it on the stone frame of the door, and turned the key again. It rasped. Grunting, I slowly pried the shackle open. I removed and hefted the big lock as a weapon. Wrenching open the heavy door, a sliver of dim light revealed yet another round light switch. The black knob on the switch resisted for a moment, then another hanging bulb lit. I slammed the door shut, and tiny hands slapped and scratched amid a thin, dreadful chanting revelry. I was in a chamber lit by a single hazy bulb. The stones pressed in, slimed with mold and bulging like toad skin. Ahead was a shoulder-high arched door. Its surface was knotty and slivered, splattered with black and green moss. Behind me, the hideous plant children scratched at the big door. I still held the heavy padlock. There was a simple gate latch on the inside of the big wooden door. I rammed the shackle of the heavy padlock through it and secured the door behind me. Now I was utterly trapped with the big door behind me and the little arched door ahead. Terror ahead and terror behind, what might be kept behind these ancient locked doors. Before I could catch my breath, something slithered from under the low, moldy arched door in front of me. Fingers grasped under the door, damp and slimy, slender as a frog's hand. I cringed, stumbling backward. A voice, raspy yet wavering and gentle. The key, the tiny key. Could there be a horror ahead that was worse than the plant children behind me? The key, the tiny key, it said again. There was a long pause as the moist hand grappled on the slimy floor. Kale, we need the key, it said. Who is that? What do you want? I whispered. We can leave here if you give me the tiny key. It's the 5th one on the ring. She does not know of the tiny key. Check the ring. I waited, confused. At the door behind me, my grandma spoke with none of her garbled nonsense. Kayla, we know you're in there. Come out and everything will be fine. Kayla, come out now. I was only trying to help you. Trust me. You do not want to end up in a hell somewhere like your miserable mother. My mother. That's right. No one called me Kale but my mother. Kayla, Grandma said, I was only trying to help you by giving you me to care for and something to care about so that you did not turn out like your junky mom. I don't know. I clamped a hand over my mouth. Kayla, we know how to get in there. There's no way out. Open up. Grandma's voice grew stronger and trembled with anger. The door handle and padlock shook and I could hear the plant children twitter. The quavering voice came from under the small door again ahead of me. The thin, frog-like hand, wet and dirty, waved as it spoke. Kale, ignore her. She's a witch. She will only hurt you. She wants to trap you the way that she trapped me. Mom, I took a breath, not convinced. Hand me the tiny key. We can escape, the little voice said more urgently. I hesitated, turning the key ring nervously. I felt along the iron ring until I felt a key no larger than a pinky fingernail. Behind me again, I heard, Kayla, I am your grandmother. My children know how to get around this door. Open it now and we'll let you go home. I'll never hurt you. She had lied about her stroke, so she probably lied about my mother too. I threaded the tiny key off the ring and held it a long while, weighing what Grandma was saying. Why would my grandma hurt me? I have only tried to help her. But those hideous plant children. Don't listen to her, Kale. She's a witch. She'll put you in here with me and forget about you. The wet, filthy hand slapped the floor with each word. Just like me. Kayla, I'm going to count to 3. Then the children will find you, Grandma said. Kale, I need the tiny key, the voice cooed. 1, Grandma said. Don't you remember me, Kale? Came the thin voice. What should I do? Who do I trust? The wet, filthy hand scrabbled on the floor. 2, I'm losing my patience, Kayla. Oh, Kale, we can run away together, just you and me. The tiny voice sounded so sincere, then desperate again. I am starving. I cannot live in the dark on sow bugs and slime anymore. I cannot. 3, now they find you. Only my mother called me Kale. The end.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done. So creepy. I'm not going in the basement anymore. My husband can go do the laundry. Not
I
doing
do. I do not get creeped out easily. That creeped me out.
it.
That's
Well,
saying
creep-
something if Deborah's
Yeah.
creeped out. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it creeped us out when she told us because she stayed here and we have a lot of plants and she had a dream that our plants turned into children and that's what set me off. I just thought it was a great idea for a story. So.
Do you still have plants in your house?
yeah, and they're by the window. They behave. So.
Good, because it's a little
So
creepy.
far.
So far, they've behaved.
Yeah, right,
This
right.
way,
This is true.
Well, Craig, based on this short story, you're going to get along with our crazy community just fine.
Thank you. Yeah, it was fun.
That was
So,
really creepy, Craig. Good job.
Thank you.
again, welcome. We're happy to have you.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So, our next author who's going to read for us is Deborah Reed, who is writing under the pen name H.G. Evans. She told me I could tell you that. Now, I have yet to understand the wisdom of pen names, but that's just me. But she writes some pretty creepy stuff, even under her own name. So, so we're really super happy to have you back, Deborah. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm loving hearing all the stories.
It is a great deal of fun. Before we go on, I just need to get a count because it's been a little while since we talked. How many books is it now?
That I have out.
Uh-huh. Okay, see, even you have to stop and count.
15,
Yeah.
I think. Something like that. 15, 16. No, I think it might be 16.
So crazy. If anybody's interested, again, I'm going to put all of the author links in the show notes. Go to their websites, check out their work. We have some really talented people in our community, and not just in the anthologies that we celebrate, but also in their mainstream work as well. You really got to do that. Deborah, I'm so happy you're back. It's been a while. I'm really excited to hear you read. Tonight, Deborah's going to be reading The Eavesdropper, which I gotta tell you was like neck and neck for contention for the title of the book. So kudos to you.
Cool. I did not know that.
So congratulations. And again, Deborah, it was the second most prolific author in this collection. So thank you for contributing as much as you did. You're always a great supporter whenever we do charity books, and I'm really very grateful to have you in the community.
Yeah, glad to do it.
So Deborah's going to read The Eavesdropper. Please, when you're ready, take the microphone and read aloud.
All right. The Eavesdropper. Eavesdropping became a habit that winter. It's their own fault, really. If they didn't want to be overheard, they should have taken better precautions before starting their conversations. I simply cannot be blamed for what occurred due to their lack of care in establishing safeguards. I mean, really. To say I am at fault is truly ridiculous. The first time was merely happenstance. And I might add, I was firmly situated long before those two came along. It was not my fault that the two seating areas were separated by only a bookcase. Granted, one that reached from floor to ceiling and 10 feet in length, but the chairs in both areas were positioned right up against the wall of books. Back to back, you could say. And a shelf of books does not a good sound barrier make, in my humble opinion. Who chooses a bookstore to plan a murder anyway? And if you do happen to be so inclined, it would seem only logical to choose a place that would ensure privacy. To this end, I will reiterate, I cannot be blamed for what happened next. It wasn't the whispered words themselves that distracted me from the mediocre plot my second favorite author had contrived. Really, I expected so much more from her, but everyone has a mishap now and then, I suppose. It was the urgency that floated between the books to my unsuspecting ears that seized my attention. As the words on the page before me faltered under suddenly shaky vision, my mother's voice rang between the walls of my mind. Matilda, how many times must I tell you that eavesdropping is rude? One day, young lady, you will listen in on the wrong conversation, and then. Mother never did finish that particular sentence, not that I found that to be a distressing thing. I rarely listened to Mother for various reasons, not the least being her penchant for exaggeration. But I digress. We were discussing the fate of one unknown victim whose life is now my responsibility to save. After all, one cannot sit by and simply let another human being be murdered. That would be uncivilized in the worst way. Unless it was a pedophile whose demise was being decided. Yes, then I could stand by. Return to the middling plot between the covers of the book clenched tightly in my fingers. Or an abuser. Yes, then too. Really, there was nothing more important than a human being who was willing to hurt another for no reason other than power or pleasure. Sometimes both, if one was honest with herself while overhearing, not eavesdropping, mind you. I could not help that these ruffians chose to sit so close while scheming, the expiration date of the unsuspecting prey. The two men must be quite foolish if they allowed such a mishap to occur. Much easier to stop them then. Or help, possibly? If their prey truly was a bane upon the virtue of the human race, well, it wouldn't be a sin to help their agenda along, would it? Unfortunately, the conspirators ended their conversation before I could learn the identity of their victim. It seemed that the daily grind impeded upon those who assisted death, as well as those of us featuring more mundane existences. Plotter's one lunch break was over. They would be back then, tomorrow, same time. It worked for Plotter too, the deeper voice of the connivers. It was quite pleasant to listen to, actually, melodic and smooth. But again, I've strayed from the hub of their dialogue. Tomorrow, they were meeting again tomorrow to finalize plans. Well, it meant rearranging my weekly excursion to the grocery store, but I was able to sort it out and regain my position from the day before, though it did require a few harrowing and nail-biting moments when I found the chair occupied by a young man in ripped jeans and headphones that covered half his head. The poor dear, he really should invest in some earbuds. They are much more economical, and shouldn't he be in school anyway? But only 4 minutes passed before he lifted lanky limbs from the cushions and wandered off. It was a wonder he didn't trip scrolling through his phone while walking. It was a feat undertaken by all young people nowadays, and one I will never understand. Look up, see the world. That's what I say. Admittedly, I peeked into the alcove on the other side of my reading spot as I navigated the shelves of books, but Plotters 1 and 2 had not yet arrived. Just as well, what with the delay Mr. Headphones generated. I know what you're thinking. Matilda is now eavesdropping. There can be no question this time. Excuse me. But I assure you that is not the case. I was saving a life, a notably honorable thing to do, unlike a common spy's snooping. Or was I planning to assist in the demise of the unsuspecting target? It was impossible to know, as I did not yet have all the information needed at my disposal. So it happened that the second instance of listening in on Plotters 1 and 2 did occur in a premeditated manner, but it was not eavesdropping. This was life or death. I would receive a medal, an article in the paper, no doubt, when all was said and done. I settled into the cushions, but could not relax, nor concentrate on the words before me. I admit to simply staring at the pages as a means of continuing the ruse of reading, though the inked lines bounced off my mind and right out of my skull before any could truly penetrate. It was indeed irritating to have my daily peaceful interlude interrupted, though I could not pretend there wasn't a vision of excitement as well. While routines were preferable, they could also grow tedious. So deep was I in my musings that I almost missed the arrival of Plotters 1 and 2. It was 2's velvety baritone that pulled me from all other thoughts, landing squarely on their resumed conspiracy. It wasn't long before I realized their plans were to be set in motion tonight. Their prey would be at Seaman's Wharf at 9 o'clock that very evening. My pulse accelerated towards sprint speed, galloping along as I realized the imminence of the affair. Tonight. I still did not know if I should be hindering or helping the plotters on the other side of the bookcase, but if I were to show up at Seaman's Wharf and see the man, for they continually referred to their prey as he, then I would know. I was certain a man with unsavory aptitudes would be obvious at first glance. So excited was I for the evening's event that I almost missed the departure of the plotters. That would not do at all. I needed to see their faces, know who it was I would be impeding or assisting in a few hours' time. I scurried from the depths of the cushions, cursing my lack of foresight. I should have been prepared for every occurrence, yet my coat and purse had been haphazardly discarded upon arrival. It was to my detriment as I leaped from the chair, only to trip over both objects and crash to the floor, novel flopping from my fingers and skidding across the polished wood slats. By the time I regained my footing and disentangled myself from the well-meaning, though entirely unwanted, intentions of the man who believed chivalry to be all well and good and dashed across the alcove to assist me, the plotters were gone. The humph that blew past my pursed lips was unladylike, to be sure, and enough to cause Mr. Chivalry to retreat to his own chair. After straightening my shirt and smoothing my hair, I gathered my things and rushed home. Preparations must be made before the trek to Seaman's Wharf. It wasn't as difficult to hide as I expected. The newly purchased black clothing, dull and lifeless in color and appeal, precisely why I never wear the horde color, did its job quite well at blending my form into the night. Concealed by shadows and a dumpster that gave new definition to the words repulsive and stench, I crouched and waited. Like any good sleuth, I had scouted the area during daylight and arrived an hour early to maneuver into place without being seen. Because of my prowess, I had an excellent view of the boardwalk, virtually deserted during the frigid winter months, the entrance to Seaman's Pub, never lacking for patronage no matter the season, and the pier itself. I was quite satisfied with my efforts, though my limbs were stiff with cold by the appointed meeting time. Adrenaline spiked as the time on my watch drew closer to the 9 o'clock hour, flushing my cold skin and dancing along every nerve ending. My gaze swept the boardwalk, the pub, the pier, repeatedly as the minutes ticked by. Each shadowed form sent my heart racing, only to stall with disappointment as the patron swept the pub door wide and disappeared inside. At 5 minutes past, concern dulled the edges of adrenaline. Perhaps I had misheard the time, the place? But no, my hearing was excellent. I had just completed my yearly physical with my doctor, who had checked all boxes on the form with enthusiasm. No, my information was unerringly correct. Of that, I had no doubt. Most likely, the victim was running late. People these days had no true concept of time or of manners. They unfailingly showed up several minutes past the appointed time with no apology on their lips to ease their disgruntled host. Truly heinous conduct. Though in this case, it could prove to be in favor of the prey. Perhaps plotters 1 and 2 would grow bored and leave without completing their task. I had yet to see anyone who had matched their descriptions either. Admittedly, their likenesses were due to my imaginative mind, having never seen their faces, but I was confident I would recognize the plotters upon first sight. At 10 minutes past, annoyance had edged out all excitement and adrenaline, allowing room for the cold to numb each extremity. This was all very disappointing, to say the least. Something had gone awry. There could be no other explanation. Unforeseen circumstances had delayed the inevitable. 15 minutes past the hour, I had had quite enough, thank you, and I was ready to abandon the charade and partake in the pricey Merlot I had purchased to celebrate the conclusion of events, whatever that might entail, and erase the chill from my body. I supposed it could also be used in commiseration as well. As I rose from my crouched position, stiff muscles protesting all the while, I was startled by a velvety smooth voice behind me. There you are. We have been waiting for you, darling. Come, we don't want to miss the show. I suddenly found my arm tucked into the elbow of a tall man, his gloved hand folded over mine where it lay on his arm. Stunned, I could do nothing but keep in step as he propelled me to the pier and down the worn planks. I must tell you, we were beginning to think you had abandoned us. Oh, I answered in a daze, an insistent nudging to the back of my mind, creating as much of a distraction as the warmth of the stranger's hand on mine, his body strong and lithe beside me. But I told them both, she will come. We must have patience. I glanced up at the chiseled profile of my unexpected companion, just as his head turned and his gaze bored down into mine. It was then that it all clicked into place in my mind. The affectionate words a direct contrast to the coldness in his eyes. The voice, familiar yet previously unplaced, pressing against the memories of bookstore conversations hidden behind a wall of books. I stared up into the face of plotter 2, suddenly very cold indeed. And that was how I found myself trussed up like a turkey, ropes digging painfully into the skin at my wrists and ankles as plotter 1 finally cut the cabin cruiser's engine, the abrupt lack of sound from the boat's motor almost as jarring as the circumstances in which I now found myself. It appeared that I had made several gross miscalculations, though many were still not quite clear. And by many, I mean all. I was at a complete loss as to why I had been bundled onto the boat parked at the end of the pier, one shrouded in darkness that I had missed entirely in my perusal, aka stakeout, and why I seemed to be the only bound occupant. Surely plotters 1 and 2 had not abandoned their original mission just to confiscate little old me. If you are thinking I am a witness and therefore must dispose of me, then I assure you I have nothing to tell. It was the only reason I could think of as to why
I think I went on a chat room even.
in this predicament. Plotter 2 lounged on the padded seat across from my constrained form. Though the night was dark, no moonlight to speak of, there was sufficient lighting on the boat to see the mirth on my captor's face. Really, you are remarkably slow, Plotter 2 drawled, leaning forward. Well, that wouldn't do. Not at all. I refuse to be spoken to in such derogatory terms. I beg your... She said this one wasn't too bright, Plotter 1 interrupted as he climbed down from the wheel. I will have you know... Plotter 2's fingers snapped loudly an inch from my nose, effectively startling me into silence. You still aren't getting it, darling. His melodic voice was tinged with annoyance. You're the mark. The what? What mark? Was there a stain on my clothing? Perhaps I rubbed up against that foul dumpster? Though wearing black and being the dead of night, I found it hard to believe those two would see any imperfection on the material. Maybe there was a smudge of something on my cheek? The mark, love, the one we were after. Well, that didn't sound right at all. No, you were talking about a man. You kept referring to your prey as he. Plotters 1 and 2 exchanged a look that fanned the flame of my own irritation. Untie me, you imbeciles. I was simply there to help you. No need to mention the inverse option, and that I hadn't yet decided as to which I would choose. It would not be helpful at this time. Plotter 2 sighed. I need you to focus for a moment, love. Ever hear of staging? What was this idiot prattling on about? I glanced out over the water, but it was too dark to see anything. I settled for listening to the waves lapping gently against the hull of the boat. Hey! Plotter 1's fingers snapped in front of my face, much as his partner's had. Someone should really tell them it was unconscionably rude. We're telling you that the conversation you eavesdropped on in the bookstore was all for your benefit, sweetheart. We weren't after anyone but you. I shook my head to dispel the confusion clouding my thoughts, but everything remained muddled. That doesn't make any sense. Plotter 1 sighed and turned toward the shadowed maw of the cabin. You want to come out here and set her straight? It was more with interest than fear that I watched a slim form mount the cabin steps onto the deck. After all, there was no real danger. This was all a simple misunderstanding. I warned you, didn't I, Matilda, darling? It took a moment for my mother's voice and the apparition before me to merge and make any kind of sense. Mother? She tilted her glass of wine in my direction, almost as if in a toast. You really must learn to be quicker on the draw, my dear. Mother tapped a manicured finger against her temple. Really, Mother, a bit overdramatic, don't you think? I turned my gaze pointedly to the ropes holding me hostage. Not in the slightest, Matilda. You see, your eavesdropping habit has gotten you into a bit more trouble than you realize. Mother, I don't eavesdrop. The words were exasperated, a repeat of a 30-year-old conversation. This is ridiculous. Mother ignored my irritation, strolling a few paces closer as she sipped her wine. You weren't too far off, sweetheart. You were witness to a confidential conversation never meant for your ears, just not the one you think. I sniffed. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Mother sighed. No, I don't suppose you do. Then untie me and let me get on with my evening, won't you? The wine waiting on my counter beckoned. I'm afraid that won't be possible, darling. You see, while the exchange you overheard in the bookstore was meant for you, the one you chose to listen in on last week outside my office door, she shook her head sadly. I always warned you about your penchant for nosiness, that it would get you in trouble one day. I have no idea what conversation you're referring to, I said, though there was something tickling the edges of memory, phrases that had seemed mundane at the time, taking on a fresh and sinister meaning. I looked at my mother with a new understanding. Had she been involved in nefarious deeds my entire life, or only more recently? Mother bent at the waist to look me in the eye. I found myself unable to look away. Don't lie, darling. It's not becoming of a lady. Neither is tying up your own daughter, I sniffed, though the words lacked heat. Unease had seeped into my bones, the suspicion that this banter might be more significant than I first believed. Your nasty little habit is no fault of mine. Mother straightened. You must take responsibility for your actions, Matilda. I carry no fault here, I snapped, writhing against the bindings around my wrists and ankles. If people do not want their discussions overheard, then they should take better precautions. It was no use. The knots were expertly made and refused to give even the slightest bit. I halted my struggles, panting from exertion. How much further would Mother take this before releasing me? I had never known her to go to such extremes to make a point before. Mother sighed. I see that we are at an impasse. I glared up at her, wondering just how far she would take this new persona. Though she wore it so easily, I had to wonder how new it might truly be. I'm sorry, darling. I truly am. Mother rested her palm against my cheek for the briefest moment before turning back toward the cabin stairs. Don't say I didn't warn you. I was still staring at the place where Mother had disappeared when plotters 1 and 2 each grabbed an arm and hauled me to my feet. I wobbled precariously, my tightly bound ankles unable to provide stability. To the edge now, plotter 1 said, gesturing toward the silver railing that circled the cruiser. His voice was pitched much higher than plotter 2 and quite nasal in quality. It was not pleasant to listen to at all. I gave plotter 1 my best haughty stare. And how do you suggest I get there when you have me trussed up like a common barn animal? Hop, sweetheart, I don't care. Hop? How undignified. I most certainly would not be hopping anywhere. I don't think so, I stated primly. And what did they think would happen once I reached the rail? If they expected me to swim to shore as punishment for the imagined deeds Mother had laid at my feet, I would not be doing it while bound by rope. They might as well release me now. Plotter 1 sighed and looked at his partner. No hope for it then. Let's get this over with. It was as firm hands once again grasped my arms, lifting and moving my body toward the railing, that the unease felt before returned full force. Perhaps they didn't mean to untie me at all. Perhaps they... One last appeal certainly couldn't hurt. Mother is prone to exaggeration, you know, I said as the cold silver barrier pressed into my stomach. Frigid winter wind tugged at the repulsive black clothing, causing a shiver to move through my body. I do not eavesdrop. Sure, sweetheart. Plotter 1's voice was distracted as he peered over the rail and into the dark water below. I cannot be held accountable for other people's lack of caution. Uh-huh. Really, plotter 1 could be more engaged in the conversation. It was insulting to have him so preoccupied while I spoke. I turned my attention to plotter 2. Surely you can see how this conjured fault cannot be laid at my feet. Yep, sure do, plotter said, the words belying his unfocused tone and gaze. Rough hands lifted my body. Oh, excuse me. Rough hands lifted my body, the railing no longer a hindrance with both men taking part in the effort. The drop to the water below was quick, the frigid waves shocking my system into immobility. I sank quickly, the blurred forms of plotters 1 and 2 receding as the water claimed me. Surely they would see the error of Mother's claims and retrieve me from the icy bonds that held me as absolutely as the rope affixed to my wrists and ankles. Surely I would not be held responsible for the fallibility of others. Surely I would not be punished for something that was no fault of mine. Surely.
Well done. Thank you very, very much.
Surely, no problem. Yeah.
Well
And stop calling me Shirley.
Nicely done. You always surprise me with your endings, and this one was no different. I'm so glad that you submitted this piece. It really is a great piece for the book. I'm very, very grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, it was fun to write.
So one of the really cool things that I feel privileged to be able to offer is that we give young writers an opportunity to have their work published. We have a policy that says if you're willing to do the work and send us your stories, for every 6 stories, you get 2 hours of community service that then go toward your Michigan State graduation requirement. I'm not sure if other states have the same requirement, but I'm certainly willing to entertain the same offer for other young authors who live outside of Michigan. One of the really extra cool things is to have a second generation of authors join us in publishing this book. Today, Emma Reed is going to read her story for us. Deborah's daughter and a really good writer in her own right. And I'm super excited, Emma, that you're here with us tonight. I really appreciate you hanging out with us for the whole program and being willing to read your story for us. She's being so shy.
Yes,
Hi, Emma.
hi, Emma.
Hi.
It's your turn.
So Emma, it's your turn to read your story, and we're all super excited. And I just want to say again, congratulations on being super brave and submitting your work. And I'm really excited to share your story with everybody tonight. So when you are ready, please take the microphone and read aloud.
Wednesday night. Wednesday night. Isabella Foyer decided that she would be going to the bathroom alone. Isabella, who preferred to be called Izzy, was the lightest sleeper in her yurt. It was Wednesday, halfway through the week, and camp. Izzy searched for a flashlight. Her mother had packed her bag for her without permission. After many minutes of searching, Izzy came to the conclusion that her mother had forgotten to pack her a flashlight. A flashlight was something on the camp's do bring list. In all caps at the beginning of the page were the words, "Bring a flashlight." The yurt was held up by cement blocks around the perimeter of the structure. There was a wooden path and a wooden deck that led down to the sidewalk. Izzy's bathing suit and towel were on the deck, drying. Izzy put them there so that if she needed to change quickly, she could run and grab the towel and bathing suit, spiders and all. The path to the bathroom was easy to memorize. A wide semicircle would lead you to the boys' door to the bathroom. If you turned right and walked about 5 steps, you would be at the girls' door. In Izzy's opinion, everything was more eerie when it was dark out. Everything was illuminated at odd angles or black from clouds covering the sky, hiding the stars in moonlight. Izzy's socks and flip-flops were the only choice Izzy was able to change into in the dark yurt. The flip-flops made sucking noises as Izzy walked down the wooden pathway to the cement path. Izzy inhaled deeply, filling her nose with the scent of wet leaves. The sucking got louder when Izzy started walking on the cement pathway. She started walking the semicircle. Izzy was a normally clumsy person. Of course, Izzy's flip-flops got caught on the even pavement squares. Izzy knew the path to the bathroom well, being woken up every night for someone to go in the bathroom with a treadie will do that to you. So it was odd when Izzy walked into something. Izzy was knocked to her butt. The pain in her butt bone was the same as when Izzy had ridden her bike for the first time last summer, right before she went to camp. The day after, Izzy was unable to sit on anything because of the pain. When most of the pain was gone, and the shock, Izzy crawled over to see what she had run into. The pavement under her hands as she crawled told her that she hadn't strayed from the path. The feeling of a man's pants under Izzy's fingers made her freeze. She began to back up, hoping the man would notice her touch his pants. "Where do you think you're going, sweetheart?" The voice of the man was familiar to Izzy. The night before Izzy had left for camp, Izzy had been watching the news with her dad. Bob Jenkins was a serial killer. He had been on the news for weeks, 21 murders in the span of 2 months. There was something similar about each target, with the person after them, then the next, and the next. All the murders were of girls, their ages spanning from 10 to 17, no adults. There was a pattern in the girl's skin. The color started at pale white, steadily growing darker as the more people were murdered. When it reached the point where the skin was almost black, it would start going back, going through the same colors as before until it went back to pale white. It went back and forth multiple times. My skin was a very pale white, the start of a new pattern. Each victim's hair was either brown or bleached blonde. There was occasionally black hair throughout each pattern. The scream started building up in Izzy's throat. The scream was about to escape her lips, warning the counselors that she needed help. Izzy wasn't alive long enough to have the scream escape her lips. On the news the next morning, Izzy's body comes up. Her body was found Thursday morning. A small but bright flashlight is under the pillow in Izzy's bunk, where Bob Jenkins put it. Bob Jenkins lives on.
Well done, Emma. Yay, Emma. I know how hard it is to read for the first time in front of a group like this. I think you did a fantastic job.
Super job, Emma.
Well done. One of the things I really loved about your story was the sound of the flip-flops. That just creeped right up into my spinal column and grabbed hold and jerked. So good job.
I think what really got to me was just, well, there were two things. Like I read this for the first time and I'm like, oh my gosh, I think like I'm living in the house with the person who came up with the story.
Yeah, and
But
then did you realize she was your daughter?
Whew. So just like the pattern of the skin color
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
to me was just very eerie when I read it. And then yeah, just the very end where she made such a big deal about her mom not packing the flashlight. And then a small but bright flashlight is under the pillow in Izzy's bunk where Bob Jenkins put it. Where it's like you just, that knowledge that he had been back in there and been able to do it so secretly, just ugh.
Well,
You freaked out. Good job.
I also freaked out.
So I really liked it, but I didn't like it because it said at camp, and I can't stand the thought of something like that happening at camp. But you described camp really well, so I definitely could imagine exactly where you're describing. So
absolutely. Again, Emma, I really want to applaud your courageousness in coming on tonight. I'm so grateful that you submitted your story.
Yep.
That was absolutely awesome, Emma. Very good. Very good.
Very well done.
Maybe someday we have to talk about my summer camp when I was a kid. It will change your mind about camps forever.
That's based off of my campus.
Oh yeah, she said this is based off the camp she was at, which was actually the camp Amy was teaching at over the summer. She wrote it while at camp.
No, I didn't.
Nice.
No, you didn't. No.
and I recognize the descriptions very well. So yeah.
Emma, I'm excited to see what you write next. And my my hope for you is that you will continue to write and continue to publish. And we have a short story flash fiction challenge up on Facebook right now. So I would encourage you to jump on the website, take a look at all of the prompts and submit to as many as you like. That offer is open for anyone listening who would like to check those prompts out. They're on our website at pagespromotions.com and on our Facebook page as well. We post a new prompt every Wednesday, and you have until December 29th to submit any or all of your stories. So it gives you some time to work on them, craft them, play with them a little bit, and then you can submit them at the end or you can submit them when they are finished. It's completely up to you. But again, that's going to be another community service project where the proceeds are going to go to support the Haley Sue Foundation, just like this one does today. So to wrap up our amazing story collection this evening, I just didn't think it would be right to do this event without having the title story read to us. Seemed like the right thing to do. For those of you who don't know Andrew Allen Smith, he writes all kinds of creepy, scary, really edge of your seat kinds of stuff. He also writes amazing action adventure series in a series called the Masterson Files. Check those out as well. Again, all this stuff is going to be on the web, on the show notes. So links and everything, check them out. Andrew, I'm so happy to partner with you on this project. I am so grateful for all of your support and helping with the pulling the whole thing together and just all the backstage stuff you helped me with. And I'm tremendously grateful.
Well, can I vote for Deborah now to be the title story? That maybe no.
I would have to republish the book.
I think it's a little late now. Yeah.
Yours is well deserving, Andrew.
Oh no.
Oh yes.
It's going to be fun. I do have to make a quick statement. just so people know, Craig and I also belong to another group, and give Craig a hand. We were just recently on a fear podcast and had a lot of fun on the fear podcast. And Craig and I are members of the Great Lakes Association of Horror Writers, and it's a fantastic group. If you like writing horror, if you like being a part of that, please consider joining. Nice group of people, and
Absolutely.
it's a ton of fun.
The people of that group are fantastic. I know quite a few of them, and they write amazing stuff. Definitely check out their group as well.
See, Craig, I had to add that in. Sorry, it's one of those things. Sorry if I put you on the spot. So go ahead,
Andrew. Go ahead.
No,
What were you going to say?
Nothing. I was patiently waiting.
Oh, wow. Something new? Patiently waiting?
Nah, I'm never patient.
So tonight, Andrew is going to read The Drifter, which again is our title story. After his reading, make sure you stick around because we're giving away books on the spinning wheel of happiness. So hang out afterward. We're going to have a good time. If you want to ask questions of any of the other authors after Andrew's story, we are certainly available to do that as well. We can have conversation, chat, whatever you'd like to do. And we'll do the spinning wheel too. So please, Andrew, when you are ready, take the microphone and read aloud.
And sorry, everyone, the longest story for last, but we're going to have fun, I hope. The Drifter. Why can't people understand? I've tried for a long time to keep my distance from people and instead pay close attention to myself and the inner peace that seems to be the smallest part of my very being. Many see this inner peace that I seek as who I am, but they often find that is not who I am, and that's when I have to move on. As I walk down the gravel of another forgotten side road, I consider the past several days and all of the actions and interactions that have led me on another long walk to another forgotten town. The brisk wind blows across my face, but I barely feel it. My hands hold my jacket, not for comfort, but for the shame of the past few days. I arrived in Ansel only a few weeks ago. It was a beautiful little town with white picket fences in the downtown, and one of the downtowns where modern yuppies rush to and chatter about the overpriced boutiques and the excessive cuteness of the restaurants. I was wearing what I'm wearing now and walked into the town hoping for silence and peace. Jobs were easy, and I found a job cleaning in a few minutes in a small warehouse right off the main street. The warehouse owner was in a bad way, as the post-COVID landscape has made workers tough to get and workers with good ethics even more challenging. I told him I could start immediately, and he gave me an extra day to find a place to stay. I filled out paperwork with him with a valid ID and the social security number that would allow me to work indefinitely. I was now Derek Griffin. I had enough money to last for a while. It made it easy to find a small over-the-garage apartment less than a block away from my new job. I didn't usually even carry a bag. The furnished apartment was perfect. It even had towels and one roll of toilet paper. This was something people took for granted until COVID happened. I signed a month-to-month lease. Mrs. Abigail, a little old lady of unknown age and sharp mind, had several questions, but seemed to like me and was hoping for a year's lease. I told her I often had to move on for work, but would pay her 1 month ahead, which seemed to end her nervousness. There was a drugstore in the downtown area and a small secondhand store where I purchased some clothes and got some everyday sundries, including soap to wash the dust off of my latest long walk from my body. It was harder to clean away the memories, much harder to hide the scars. The warehouse job was good work. It didn't take long for me to be completely immersed in cleaning, stacking, and loading. My size made it easy for me to lift and carry almost everything, but I knew how to use the forklift and pallet jacks as necessary. My new boss was Mr. Johnson. He was ex-military and, for an ex-Marine, was very calm. I worked extra on the first several days as he was behind and only had 2 other warehouse workers that were young, inexperienced, and full of themselves. I gave them distance, ate alone, then went home to my new place and stayed awake thinking of the past. After my first week, I met Caroline. She was the daughter of Mr. Johnson and did some of the books for him. I guess she was probably 25, but had no real clue and didn't want to get involved. She had other ideas. Each day she would try to talk to me, and I would nod and do my work. As the sweat soaked my long sleeve shirt and my hands glistened, she would come up and comment about how I needed to slow down and not strain myself. I would nod politely and continue my work, oblivious to the suggestion. I didn't need to slow down. All I needed was to find my peace. In the second week, Caroline stood in front of me with her palm out to my chest and said, "Did I do something to make you dislike me?" I was a little taken aback. It was infrequent that people noticed me until that time I had to leave. It was even rarer that someone paid attention to what was happening with me or even cared if I existed. I found my voice and said, "No, ma'am, I'm just trying to be a good worker." "Well, you're probably the most exceptional worker my father has ever found, or so he says. But all you ever do is work. You stop and eat for a few minutes and keep working. I don't think I've ever seen you take a break, and I don't think I've ever seen you talk to anyone. You look like you need a friend." "I don't have many friends," I lied. I actually had no friends. Once upon a time, I had a friend, and it didn't end very well in that story. I just want to get my work done. "I don't have many friends either." Caroline was looking at the wall. "The world seems to look down on a single mom who's only 24. I don't judge. I was trying to make conversation, but since I rarely made conversation, I wasn't very good at it. I was good at other things I didn't want to be good at. "You just try and get your work done." Caroline was still looking at the wall and not at me. "It would be nice if you could talk to me for a few minutes, because the other workers and everybody else just stare at me or act like I'm an awful person. You don't have to, but it would be nice to have someone to talk to." I considered for a moment. This was a bad idea, and I had been here before. There were 1,000 reasons I should not talk to this woman, only one reason I should. "I'll take my lunch at 12:30 if you'd like to talk." I picked up the vast crate and walked away, leaving Caroline staring at the wall. I tried to set things aside and find my peace, but I knew Caroline would again be why I would leave. It seemed there was a Caroline, Johnny, or a Mary Ellen in every town. Someone who needed to be something that they thought I could give. I had faced this before and not walked away. Now here I was again. Perhaps this time would be different. 12:30 came and I sat down on a crate. Caroline joined me with a small lunchbox, and we ate relatively quietly for the first few minutes. "I suppose you have some questions." Caroline was staring out at the open sky through the warehouse doors. "No, I have no questions." I looked at the sky as well, trying to find some peace in this now repetitive conversation. "Well, I'll answer the ones that you won't ask. I dated a man in high school that got me pregnant. I have a daughter named Anna. She's the light of my life and makes my father smile all the time. With my mother gone, it's just him and I and Anna, and Anna's father lives in the area, and I had to convince my dad not to kill him. You know how Marines are, always ready to solve the situation." Of course I knew how Marines were. I had learned a long time ago that Marines were tenacious and to give them distance if possible. I had no desire to tell Caroline this, so I just listened. "I'm a small town girl and I don't want to be in a big town. I would be happy with just me, my dad, and Anna. I'm not dating and I'm not looking to date, so don't worry, I'm not trying to date you. I don't have any friends because Anna's father is pretty much poisoned that well. It's just me." "It's good to be you." I kept staring out at the sky and saw the pickup truck pull up. Caroline saw the pickup too and stood up and put her lunch away. She walked to the warehouse door as a tall, well-built blonde man approached her. I couldn't initially hear what they were saying and honestly didn't care. I suppose I could have listened and it would have been easier. Instead, there were suddenly finger points at me and the man pushing past her towards me. It only took a few moments for him to be in front of the crate I was sitting on, asking questions about who I was and what I thought I was doing with Caroline. I had faced his kind before. I put away my lunch, picked up my lunchbox, stood up, and walked away. "Don't you walk away from me," the man said as he walked back in front of me. "I want some answers right now." "I don't want any trouble, and it would be best for you to walk away." I turned to walk away and felt his arm grab my shoulder and try to spin me around. I stopped, but he could not move me. I turned and looked at him, and he realized somewhere in his mind that I was well overmatched. He was probably 6'5", but I was taller. He was probably 240 pounds, but I was heavier. There was a look on his face I had seen too many times. He pushed his finger into my chest and said, "If you don't want trouble, stay away from my girl." Caroline was indignant. "I am not your girl. Except for Anna, you're the biggest mistake I've ever made." Behind her, Caroline's father walked up. "I 100% agree with that. You do know you're trespassing right now." "I'm leaving, old man," the younger man said. "Remember to stay away from my girl. You're not so big that I can't take care of you." Inside, I was saddened. It was likely I would soon lose my small apartment where I felt comfortable, my extra set of clothes, my new toothbrush, and a place that I found peaceful. Why were people always so quick to distrust? Why did people want to test me to extremes? Why did the people who thought they were monsters not realize there were real monsters in the world? Caroline looked at me. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." I looked back at the sky and watched the pickup truck leave. I tried to avoid conflict. "That was Sam." Caroline was obviously angry. "Sam is Anna's father, but there's nothing between us. I wish he would just go away, but he never does. I'm sorry that he's such a pain in the ass, and I'm sorry if he bothered you or made you feel bad." I know his type. I stared at the blue sky and noticed a cloud that looked a little bit like an elephant slide past the open warehouse door. "I'm not concerned." Mr. Johnson shook my hand and said, "Thank you for not running away. That boy has run off good help before. People get afraid of him and they just leave or something else happens. If he bothers you, let me know. I'll get the sheriff on him." "He won't bother me." The elephant had moved on, and now there was an earthworm-shaped cloud sliding across the sky. I looked down at Caroline and her father. "I'm not afraid." My voice rang with such conviction, I'm not sure they knew how to take it. They looked at me with an uncomfortable silence that closed in around us. "Well, that's good. Just remember what I said," Mr. Johnson told me, breaking the moment as he walked back up to his office. "Sorry about our lunch," Caroline said. "I really wanted to know more about you." "It's not much to say." I looked down at Caroline, away from the clouds and my peace. "I'm just me." I went back to work. The two younger guys started following me around. As I stacked crates and unloaded trucks, they began to help more where usually they were nowhere to be found. Normally, the trucks would take most of the day to unload and stack, but with the two extra workers, it went quick, and I began sweeping out the warehouse. The two boys quietly joined. Not a word was said, but when I looked up, they would nod at me with some type of respect. "Thanks for standing up to Sam," one of the boys said. "This place is hard to work at with him showing up all the time." I nodded, but said nothing and kept working. The last truck of the day came in and we unloaded it rapidly. It took no time to stack and reload, and the warehouse was in near perfect condition. It was Friday, and Mr. Johnson handed each of us envelopes. As the two younger men left, Mr. Johnson looked at me. "You sure have made a difference with them. I put a little extra in your envelope just for that." "Thank you," I said, gathered my lunchbox, and walked the short distance to my tiny apartment. The weekend was uneventful. I made it uneventful by staying in. I helped Mrs. Abigail on Sunday for a few hours with her garage and cleaned it up. Mrs. Abigail told me about her husband, her life, and her children. Her husband died last year. Her children were long since gone, living in California, and she never heard from them. She asked me no questions and just allowed me to listen. I listened and was amazed at how few breaths this woman took as she explained her life history to me. Monday morning came and I was at work bright and early again. Sam was waiting in his pickup truck, and as I walked to the closed doors, he got out of his truck and walked up to me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw two other men walking towards me from different angles. Not even 2 weeks, I thought to myself. I hadn't done anything and would have to move on again. "I wanted to do a little follow-up to our discussion." Sam was looking at me dead in the eyes, thinking that I was unaware of all that was happening around me. Sometimes I thought humanity was stupid as they ignored their senses. Behind me, a man was carrying a baseball bat. I saw it as clearly as if I was looking at it. A wooden Louisville Slugger. The other man brought a split 2x4. Sam was looking at me dead in the eye. I looked down at him and saw all the fear in his eyes that he was trying to hide. I whispered to him, "You don't want to do this. I am the monster you fear at night. You will lose." He paused for a moment. He was unnerved, but then suddenly shook himself back into reality, thinking what he saw was real, humanity again. The baseball bat came across the back of my head and shattered. I'm sure the man that swung it was feeling his hands in new ways, as his hands and fingers were not built of the same thing I was. He backed off, holding a shattered piece of a bat. The second man swung the 2x4 across my back, and it split but did not shatter. I never stopped looking at Sam, but Sam looked at the two men, and his eyes widened. It would be good to leave me alone. I started to move forward, but Sam put out his arm. You stay away from Caroline, he put his palm on my chest. I looked down, calmly reached up and took his hand from my chest. As I moved it away from my body, I put more and more pressure on his arm. Sam began to sweat and his eyes pleaded until I let go and said again, it would be good to leave me alone. I walked into the employee entrance of the warehouse and realized how stupid I was. Perhaps humanity was not as stupid as I was. I could have just walked away and done nothing. I could have stepped away from the men and avoided showing them even a portion of what I was capable of. Instead, I brought attention to myself. Caroline walked up to me, oblivious of everything that had just happened. Hey, big guy, she said. I brought you a donut. She handed me a small bag and I opened it to see a Long John and a napkin. Thank you. There are about 20 minutes before anybody else gets here. Why don't we sit down and talk for a few? This was a bad idea. I knew this was a bad idea, yet I sat down with her and started eating the Long John. It was pretty awesome. You standing up for me, Carolyn was smiling at me. Why weren't people afraid of me? I was easily twice her size. By that alone, she should have given me a wide berth. Instead, people always thought I was good and calm and that person they could trust. Caroline turned around momentarily and motioned, and a small blonde girl wandered up. This is Anna. Anna, this is my friend Derek. Derek works for Grandpa. I smiled and looked down at the child. I knew what to do and how to make people comfortable, but kids were more intelligent than adults, and Anna looked at me as though I had escaped her nightmares last night. I put out my massive hand and said, "Nice to meet you, Anna." The tiny girl took my hand and shook it. Her eyes were always on mine. "Mama, can I go color?" Anna asked in a voice that was so sweet it would cause normal humans diabetes. "You go ahead," Caroline leaned over to me. "I have to take her to school this morning and just wanted you to meet her." I should tell you that Sam met me at the door. He and two other gentlemen attempted to scare me away. "Are you okay?" Caroline sounded concerned. I wasn't used to people being concerned about me. I stopped for a moment and thought about it. "I'm fine," I finally noted. "They couldn't hurt me, but I think they left a little wiser." "Don't be so sure," Caroline said. "Sam is about the stupidest person I know." I laughed inside. It was the same story again. Someone always didn't want to pay attention to the signs everywhere I went. Everywhere I went, someone wanted to take on the bigger person just to show them they could do it. If only I could work without my shirt and then they could see, they might feel differently. Even if I rolled up my sleeves, they might start to understand. Caroline stood, and I stood as well and put out my hand. Caroline deftly slid my hand aside, moved in and hugged me. I felt her warmth, even through my long sleeve shirt and t-shirt. She held me, and for just a moment, I awkwardly put my arm around her and patted her softly on the back. Anna walked up as Caroline stepped away from me. "Mama, are we going to school?" Caroline was flushed, and I felt terrible that I had that effect for a moment. It would not be suitable for either of us to spend more time together. I knew I would have to leave anyway, but the hug felt nice. "Yes, honey, let's clean up so we can get in the car and leave Mr. Derek alone so he can work." I watched the two of them walk past as I had watched so many. I had to let go of the past, but it seemed it continuously repeated itself. In every town, there was someone nice who only wanted to be friendly. In every town, there was someone ignorant of the world who wanted to be evil. I thought about how long it had been since I had a hug and how good it felt. I set aside, opened the warehouse doors, and began to work. 15 minutes later, I was interrupted while stacking a pallet. Mr. Johnson walked up and grabbed a box next to me and helped me stack a new shipment. "I saw Caroline was down here with you." He picked up another box, "And I saw those boys outside this morning. It looked like they hit you pretty hard, but it didn't bother you, did it?" All I needed was one of the good people against me. "No, sir, it didn't bother me. I've seen a lot of shit in my life, and I guess I've never seen someone take a baseball bat to the back and shatter it. I'm guessing you've got a titanium plate back there, but I don't really want to know. I just need to ensure you don't hurt my girl." He looked down for a moment. "I think I've hurt her enough for both of us by not killing that sorry little pissant. If you killed him, he would win. It sucks how the bad guys win if the good guys do what they need to do to make it right." You got that right. Mr. Johnson looked out at the open warehouse doors. If I hurt him, I go to jail and she loses her father. If I kill him, she loses me forever. Or he kills me, or she has to put up with him forever. I've been playing a losing hand for too long, and I can tell you that it's obvious you can't protect her better than I can. No, sir, I can't. I hung my head for a moment, not knowing how to say it. I will do all I can, but eventually I will have to move on. I've traveled the whole world moving on because people can't understand what it's like to be me. I paused. My father set me on a challenging journey. I traveled the Arctic Circle. I've been spurned by many and applauded by more, but always I have to move on in the end. That's about the most cryptic shit I've ever heard. Mr. Johnson picked up another box, almost as big as the one I was stacking. I would say you're a mercenary, but there's something more to all this, and I'm not going to ask you again. You're doing a great job, and those boys working with you respect you, and you're working more than they ever have here. As long as you're good to my Caroline, you're welcome, and I'm sorry I didn't come out and stand next to you this morning. I'm not a mercenary. I placed the giant box on a new pallet. I'm just me. Will you keep being you, Mr. Johnson said as he wiped his hands and brushed off his pants. I appreciate you letting me help you. I looked at him and smiled. I often wondered what my smile looked like, but he smiled back, turned, and walked to his office. I didn't see Caroline till the end of the day. She was back with Anna and came into the warehouse on her way home. She walked over to me and handed me a small bag. I got you some food. You didn't have to do that. I could smell the food and knew it would taste good. If you haven't figured it out yet, I don't need anybody telling me what I can do. If I want to get you food, I'll get you food. Anna looked up as her mom talked to me. Now you eat that and have a good night. I have some work to do and Anna will keep me company. I thanked Caroline, took the bag, got my lunchbox, and took the slow walk home only a few blocks away. When I reached my tiny apartment, Mrs. Abigail was standing in the driveway wearing a lovely pink muumuu with curlers in her hair. Are you having a good day, Mr. Griffin? Yes, ma'am. I started to walk up the stairs to my little apartment. Do you smell smoke, Mr. Griffin? Mrs. Abigail turned and looked towards the area I had just left. I looked up and saw the trailing smoke go into the air. I was always amazed. It has always amazed me how smoke and fire were almost as alive as I was. I heard the sirens in the distance and left my pack and dinner on the stairs, rushing back the way I had come. As I got closer, I could hear the flames, and turning the corner, I saw the warehouse I had just left engulfed in flames. My walk became a run, and as I made it to the front, Mr. Johnson was lying on the ground, face bloodied, covered in soot, trying to sit up. They took Anna. He looked at me with the pleading eyes of a father. Caroline is still in there. The fire's too hot and I couldn't get to her. I saw the flames rising in the warehouse and it reminded me of so many years ago when I was the target and people tried to set me on fire. I survived and have respected fire ever since. Some people thought I was afraid, but I was not. I knew fire was a primal force that could barely be stopped. I knew what that was like. I grabbed a hose from outside the warehouse, sprayed myself with water, then rushed inside as firefighters ran to try to stop me. The inside of the warehouse was a scene from hell. Flames attacked cardboard and wood, and the heat would have instantly caused an ordinary man to collapse. I looked at the office and saw the door was open. At the bottom of the stairs, Caroline was there. Her body was crumpled to the ground, and I ran and picked her up. She felt limp in my arms. I did not even want to consider the possibility that she was gone. The door was still open and I ran to it. I curled her as small as possible so my body shielded her from most of the heat. I grabbed her hair with my arm when it started to spark and realized my shirt was also on fire. I ran faster, and as I entered the air in front of the warehouse, I felt the hose spray down on me from Mr. Johnson. Paramedics rushed to Caroline, but they all looked at me as well. I stood quietly for a moment until I realized that what was once a shirt was now ashes. And as the water spray revealed the terrible scars all over my body, my wrists bound together by suture, now grown together as one, my neck, arms, shoulders, and legs all bore the scars of my creation. I saw one of the people watching gasp as another simply mouthed the letters WTF. Mr. Johnson looked at me as Caroline coughed. Are you okay? I'm fine. I looked around and saw the truck. Then I saw Sam holding Anna in the back of his truck. I began walking towards them and Sam saw me. Anna was screaming. Sam's two friends jumped into the back of the pickup as Sam pushed Anna into the front seat and started the truck. I started running towards them, but the truck sprayed gravel as they drove away. I was frustrated until a large F-350 pulled up next to me. Mr. Johnson was sitting inside. Get in. I got in the truck, and before the door was closed, the giant engine roared to life after Sam and Anna. I'm not going to ask what happened to you. Mr. Johnson was purely focused on the road ahead, but spoke as he drove. I just need to save my granddaughter. Can you help me? Yes, sir, I said as he took the corner in a full slide. They're heading out to the quarry. The boy is an idiot, and I'm worried about what he may do. Caroline told him to stay away and that she was getting a protective order to keep him away from Anna. He said something idiotic and started beating up Caroline. I knocked him down, and if it weren't for those two idiots he had with him, I would have ended the situation. Instead, he set my place on fire and left Caroline to die. He would have killed me too if all the people hadn't come up. I know his kind. They are cowards, and we'll get Anna back. I watched the road slide past. Soon we were on the tail of Sam's pickup. Sam took a sharp curve on a gravel road, and suddenly we were parallel to a deep quarry. Without warning, he slammed on the brakes, and the two men in the back struggled to hold on, not to be thrown from the vehicle. Sam jumped out of the front and closed the door, trapping Anna inside. He was carrying a tire iron, and the two men jumped out next to him. I got out of the truck as Mr. Johnson slowed and jumped to the ground while the truck came to a stop. I landed with a solid thump and was steady. I walked to Sam and his friends with careful determination. For the first time in a long time, I had felt I had a reason for being in this situation I was about to be in. You seem to have a wardrobe problem. Sam slapped the tire iron on his hand as he walked towards me. Look at his skin, one of his friends said. He looks like he's been ripped to pieces and put back together again. Sounds like a good idea. Sam slapped the tire iron against his hand and winced a little when it struck. The three men widened out around me. I saw Mr. Johnson over to the side, and he pulled out a baseball bat from behind his seat and started walking over as well. This changed things a little for Sam, but not for me. I looked over at Mr. Johnson, then glanced at the cab of their truck, and he understood. Anna was the priority. We're going to try this again, and this time it's not going to be as good for you. Sam moved forward and swung at me. I grabbed the tire iron as it swung and held it tight. It vibrated in my hand from the impact, and I know that Sam felt it far worse than I ever could. I pulled the tire iron away from him and threw it into the quarry. All I wanted to do was finally be left alone, and there is always someone like you. My eyes narrowed on Sam. I'm going to ask you nicely to leave me alone. If all of you leave town, this will go easier. Sure, we'll do that. Sam was wearing a nasty smirk, even though it was apparent that his hand still hurt as he held it. So we can avoid the murder charge from killing your ass. Just remember, I looked at all three of them, I gave you a chance. The two men swung at me from different sides. I let them hit me. Sam swung immediately after, and I wondered if he broke his hand. One of the men ripped the rest of my shirt off, exposing the numerous scars where limbs had been attached, nerves stretched, and a circulatory system built from scratch. To an outsider, I was nothing but a patchwork man, but I was a miracle born of a man's dream. And the living power of the storm. I saw Mr. Johnson get Anna into his truck, and I swung sideways, knocking both men 20 feet into the air. They crashed onto the ground and rolled in pain. Sam was indignant, even in the face of impossible odds against him. He pulled the pistol from his pocket and aimed it at me. I smashed it in my hand, and the pistol exploded as my fingers crushed the cartridges to the point where the bullets went off. Unfortunately, Sam's hand was there too. The bloody fingers he pulled away were dark with powder burns as blood ran down his arm. You couldn't just leave me alone, could you? My voice was rising and I felt pure anger. I liked Caroline, Anna, and Mr. Johnson. I liked Mrs. Abigail. I was furious and there was a tear in my eye as I dropped Sam to the ground crying like a child. Let's set the record straight on what you're up against. I walked to the 20 feet to his truck and knelt. slammed my fingers through the side of the door and around the truck's frame right at the door. I screamed. It echoed in the quarry and through the woods surrounding the quarry. It was a primal scream born out of the storm that gave me life. I stood, and the truck tilted up as I pulled it off the ground. The truck was now at a 40-degree angle with the tires nearest me dangling off of the ground, but I wasn't done. I pulled the truck back towards me and in one motion pushed up. The snap was like lifting a piece of paper, and the truck was now above my head, held by the frame in my hand. My fury knew no bounds as I looked over at Sam and his friends watching me in disbelief. "Do we have a problem?" I said in a voice louder than 100 thunderclaps. I let the truck slide towards me just a little, then pushed it. Muscles never meant to see life again flexed with the power they should have never had as the truck went airborne and landed somewhere in the middle of the quarry. There was a crash, then a splash as the truck sank to the bottom of the water in the quarry. I brushed my hands off and walked to Sam. The two men had backed up and were now huddled together, looking at me in disbelief and terror. I reached down and Sam cringed as I lifted him by his shirt and felt the thread strain. "Should you join your truck?" Sam lowered his head. "No," he looked at his hand. "I'll leave town." "Only to come back for me or for Anna or Caroline?" "I might be less than perfect, but I'm not that stupid." Sam was sullen and obviously in pain. "Gonna tell the world and have them come for me?" "Who would believe me?" Sam was crying. "I'm such an idiot." I dropped Sam and walked over to Mr. Johnson's truck. He too was looking at me in disbelief. Anna was snuggling into his arms, having seen nothing. "Should I walk home?" "No," he said. "Get in. I think I owe you a lot." The drive back to town was quiet. Anna held my hand. The warehouse was damaged horribly, but the insurance adjuster was already there. Caroline was at the hospital, and I asked Mr. Johnson to drop me off at my apartment. "Am I going to see you tomorrow?" Mr. Johnson asked. "It might be better if I move on." I put my hands in my pockets. "I'm not sure if I should stay. Once people learn about me, they don't want me around." "I thought you just wanted to be left alone." Anna was now asleep in the front seat. "I just want peace." I lowered my eyes for a moment. "I can't always promise peace, but I can promise a good paycheck. Looks like we have a lot to rebuild. See you in the morning." I looked up at the sky. It was the first time someone had seen even a little of what I was, and they still wanted me around. "Yes, sir." I felt the breeze flow against my skin and knew I needed to change clothes. "I'll be there early so we can get started." "I'll tell Caroline and let her know how she is in the morning." Mr. Johnson drove away. I walked to my little apartment, hoping that tomorrow would be a peaceful day. I changed my clothes back into the ones I was wearing when I arrived in this little town. I went downstairs and began to walk. I was at the edge of the town and off on a side road, looking at the beauty of the area. I had seen hundreds, if not thousands, of these side roads and looked down the road, wondering where it would lead. I turned around, and somewhere in the distance was the city I just left. Caroline and Anna were there. Perhaps it was time to stand for something instead of walking away this time. I decided it's time to make a stand. Home is only a few minutes away, and I'm sure Mrs. Abigail would miss me, or at least my rent. Besides, I have work to do in the morning.
Well done. Thank you so much, Andrew. I absolutely adore that story.
Mm,
Thank you so much.
Amazing. Flat out amazing.
so good.
Whew, we made it through.
Cousins rejoice. Okay, awesome. Oh my gosh, such great stories. We have 55 short stories in this collection. 33 amazing authors submitted, 55 short stories. I couldn't be more proud of the indie author community than I am today. This is going to be a great book to serve an amazing organization, the Haley Sue Foundation. Please check the show notes, learn more about the foundation, learn how you can support them. If all you do is buy a book, that's enough for us. Also, check the show notes. You'll see links to all the authors that you heard read tonight and find their other work. I hope that you will continue to support them as well. Now, on to the fun stuff. Are you guys ready for the fun stuff? I know we've been at this a while. It's been a long show, but it had to be done, you guys. It just had to be done. All right. So we're going to do what I affectionately call the spinny wheel of happiness. For those of you who were a part of the mayhem of our COVID virtual book festivals, this is something we started doing just to kind of end on a high note every night and to have a little bit of fun. We're going to do it again today. We're giving away 2 books today. One is the aforementioned By the Seat of Our Pants Madness. This is just an amazing, I'm calling it an experimental literary performance art piece. What we did is we randomly assigned chapter numbers to a bunch of authors. We gave them a very loose foundation to write within, and everybody wrote a chapter only having read the one chapter that came before theirs. And then we collaboratively wrote a novel together. It was a lot of fun. We are currently, Andrew and I are working on editing the second book, which is called By the Seat of Our Pants Chaos. That's going to be out in a little while. Watch the Facebook page and the website for more information about when that is forthcoming. The second book is we're going to give away here a copy of The Drifter and Other Unusual Tales, which is what you heard readings from tonight. This is an amazing book, 524 pages of just incredible work by amazing indie authors. You'll get if you win that book, it'll be a hard copy edition. It's the first time we're doing one of our anthologies in hard copy edition because we just thought it was so spectacular we couldn't pass it up. So, everybody turn on your microphones. Everybody yell, cheer, and scream because once again, technology has failed me. See, there you go. Once again, technology has failed me and I could not get the spinning wheel of happiness to do the sound thing. So you guys
Take it away, Andrew.
Somebody's, well, I didn't have time to connect with Andrew earlier today because I was so super busy. So maybe for the next one, we'll figure out how to make the sound work. Speaking of the next one, one more plug before we do the spinning wheel. In February, we are doing another virtual book festival. Andrew's going to be there. Ruby's going to be there. Amy's going to be there. Marianne's going to be there. A whole bunch of other authors are going to be there. We want more of you signing up. If you're an indie author or a small press author and you would like to come join the mayhem of something similar to this, but oh my gosh, so much more fun, come join us. You can find the sign up form on the Pages Promotions website. This time around, the theme is the case of the missing manuscript. We're going to be having fun with the idea of a mystery dinner party type thing. Authors are going to get characters that they have to portray during the festival and solve clues to solve the mystery about who done it. Readers who join in will get access to a whole bunch of clues that Jacob Bullen and I are pulling together for a virtual scavenger hunt. So everybody gets to play. Everybody's going to have a good time. We're going to give away a ton of books, and it's just if you've seen any of our past festivals, you know that it's just unbridled goofiness.
Amen.
And we have a really, really good time. So if you haven't signed up, sign up. Get your friends to sign up. If you're a reader listening today, please come join the event. This is why we do it, to make you aware of the amazing stories that are out there. So now that all my commercials are over, sorry about that, guys. Here we are. We're going to do the spinning wheel of happiness. Again, Diana's going to share her screen. God, I hope. You know, I can never tell if the technology is going to work. Did it work this time?
It
Yes.
did.
Yes.
There.
Da,
So much
da,
fun.
da, da, da,
Da,
da,
da,
da.
da, da,
Okay,
da,
no,
da,
not yet. I didn't
Oh.
push the
da,
button
da,
yet.
da.
Didn't push the button yet. Okay, here we go. So this first spin is for the copy of Madness, our collaborative novel. Okay, ready, set, go.
Da, 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 da.
That
DJ!
was
DJ Winston, yay! Copy. I would love to hear, DJ, when you get this book, after you read it, what you think of it. Please, please, I'd love some feedback because, oh my gosh, what an adventure in collaborative writing. It was super fun. Okay, this second spinning wheel of happiness is going to be for the hardcover edition of The Drifter that we read from tonight. So you guys gotta sing faster because it doesn't take that long. See, there we go. Here we go. Chelsea! Chelsea, you get the hard copy edition.
I knew all my hard work of getting this thing out there isn't for nothing.
See, it's kismet. You did it, dear. You did it. Feel free to keep it for yourself. Feel free to give it as a gift. I know you couldn't wait. You already got copies, but
Oh, I'll probably keep the hard copy. The paperback will probably be the gift.
awesome.
I'll be selfish.
Awesome.
That's fair.
So again, does anybody have any questions or comments for our authors? Any conversation you'd like to just jump right in there?
DJ needs to know how to get his book.
Oh yeah, see, this is so one of the great things about the virtual festivals is that I have this wonderful group of authors who I call my sanity crew, and they remind me to do these silly little things. So DJ, here's how you get your book. Send me an email, Diana, DIANA, at pagespromotions.com. You can see it right there above my head on the screen. It's Diana at pagespromotions.com. Send me your mailing address. Put something in the subject line like, hey, I want a book. Thank you, Amy. And I will get that book shipped out to you as soon as it arrives. I'm supposed to get it here within the next couple of days, and I will tuck it in the mail to you along with tracking information as soon as my book comes to me. It's supposed to come Wednesday, I think. So thank you, Amy, for once again being on my sanity saver crew. Anybody else have anything that they'd like to say before we wrap up the insanity?
Can we say thank you to you for putting all of this together?
Yeah.
My pleasure. Are you
Yes.
kidding? I do this completely selfishly because I like it when people read me stories out loud. I'm going to be listening to this recording over and over again. It's purely selfish.
I just want to say, everybody, great job. I enjoyed all the stories, and I always like Deborah's stories. And I mean, it was nice hearing Amy's and Ruby's. I enjoyed that. I mean, it was really good. Craig, always have fun listening to you too. And it was a lot of fun, and I'm glad that everybody had at least a little bit of excitement.
Absolutely. Any other parting shots across the bow from anybody else? That this is a wacky thing we did during our summer reading regatta. Anybody else have any final things you'd like to say? Hi, Pepper. Any other things going out there?
I just have to say good luck everyone sleeping tonight. Don't think about plants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Burn your plants.
Well, the good news is that Drake doesn't seem to have been in here listening, so maybe Drake can get some sleep.
Yeah. We'll see. Also, if you've got plants, water them. That'll probably kill them. So.
And sunlight might help.
Yeah. Water.
Sunlight, good.
Yeah, sunlight, good. For those of you who are curious, no, I'm not writing for Nano tonight. I'm going to bed. I'm done, you guys. I'm cooked. Anybody else? Any last conversations as we close out the evening. Deborah, please tell Emma how very pleased I am that she came on the program and that she read and that she submitted, and please tell her I want her to keep writing and just don't stop.
I will do that for sure.
Thank you. One day I'd like her to publish more books than you have. That's my wish for her.
And I think that she probably will. She's on her 4th book right now.
Wow.
Yes.
Does she have a website where we can go buy these?
Not yet.
Okay.
Her mother is still currently editing the trilogy, and as she's working on the 4th. So hopefully, eventually, yes, they will be available, just not yet.
Awesome. Okay, let us know,
Yes.
because we will help promote her to the moon and back.
I will be in.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank
They will join yours up on the wall behind me.
you.
Anybody else have any last final comments before we close out the evening and let everybody get back to their nano or their sleeping or whatever it is they do
Or
this time?
Pepper going outside, who's
Oh, yeah.
really wanting to go.
Yeah, I'm sure she is. Anybody else? No? Okay, great. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Please watch for the link tomorrow on Facebook. Share this with your friends. Please let everybody know that this is not just a revenue generator. This is a book that supports an amazing foundation that does great work, the Haley Sue Foundation. We are very, very proud to help them in any way that we possibly can. So please share it with your friends. Tell everybody. And I guess that's it. Have a wonderful night.
Good night, all.